Good afternoon. Happy Friday, everybody. This is going to be the order today. We're going to start off with the Department of Veterans and Military Families, and then we're going to go with Maryland Department of Emergency Management, and then we're going to go to Maryland Department of Transportation, Transit Administration, and then Maryland Department of Environment. So we're going to get started. Our analysts will get us started.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. Today I will be presenting the fiscal 26 budget analysis for the Department of Veterans and Military Families, or DVMF, which was renamed by Chapter 11 and 12 of 2024. DVMF provides services and conducts programs, including outreach to assist the state's veterans, their families, and survivors. The department manages Charlotte Hall Veterans Home, which is the only assisted living and skilled nursing facility for veterans and their eligible spouses in the state. The graph on page 1 shows that the fiscal 26 budget for DVMF has decreased by $608,000 or 0.9%. Special fund lowers by 91%, majorly due to a change in the funding mechanism for Charlotte Hall starting fiscal 25 after a new management contractor was onboarded in June of 2023. Turning to page 2, the actual general fund reversion in fiscal 24 closeout was $2.6 million lower than expected. This was due to higher than anticipated operating costs for Charlotte Hall in fiscal 24. For fiscal 25, 2 cost containment actions related to fund swaps from general fund to non-general fund were approved by BPW in July 2024. These actions reduced the department's fiscal 25 general fund appropriation for the cemetery program by $500,000 and the Veterans Home program by $400,000. We request the department to comment on how these swapped funds are being replaced. There are 6 proposed fiscal 25 deficiency appropriations, which reduce the department's total appropriation by $5.8 million. General fund reduces by $2.3 million in total, which includes reduction to align funding with the actual fiscal 24 Charlotte Hall expenditures and a one-time expense of $825,000 to fund ongoing litigation with the prior Charlotte Hall contractor. We request the department to provide an update on the ongoing litigation. Special fund reduces by $4.1 million in total, which include aligning fiscal 25 funds in accordance with the new funding mechanism for Charlotte Hall and prior available special fund balances in the cemetery program, Veterans Home program, and service animal program. Federal fund increases by $613,000. In fiscal 24 and 25, special and federal funds deficiency appropriation add unspent balances from prior year. The department should brief on the reason for not expending these special and federal fund balances. On page 4, Exhibit 1 shows a total of $63.4 million in the department's fiscal 26 allowance. $49.7 million is for the operation of Charlotte Hall accounts, of which 95% is used for contractual services for managing the facility. Exhibit 2 on page 5 shows the changes in proposed budget. The largest change of about $1,200 million is related to the fiscal 25 special and federal fund deficiency appropriations and about $800 million for Charlotte Hall operating expenses to align with the fiscal 24 actual expenditures. This is partially offset by salary increases. On page 6, in fiscal 26, the department has a transfer and reclass of 1 position, resulting in no change in the department's personnel. As of December 31st, 2024, there were 8 vacant positions in the department. This is 1.81 positions above necessary vacancies. Moving on to key observations. Exhibit 3 on page 8 shows that Charlotte Hall's occupancy has increased as of December 2024 compared to 2023, but this is still operating under capacity. Admissions to Charlotte Hall were paused from April 2023 to November 2023 to conduct facility assessments and implement corrective actions. In its 2024 MFR submission, the department reported decrease in residents at the end of fiscal 24. To better align with fiscal 24 actual expenditures, the fiscal 26 allowance reduces estimated operating expense for the facility by $3.9 million. The department anticipates increase in residents in fiscal 25 and 26. We request the department to comment on its plan to fund increased residents after the reduced appropriation in fiscal 25 and 26. After the onboarding of the new contractor beginning June 6, 2023, there was a temporary funding mechanism in place from June 23 through fiscal 24. On page 9, Exhibit 4 shows the new funding mechanism starting fiscal 25, where the Medicare, Medicaid, and private pay are deposited to general fund, and the state pays the contractor for expenses through general fund expenditures. Third quarterly report on Charlotte Hall staffing and federal ratings reports. Charlotte Hall eliminating nurse agency and nurse aid agencies because Charlotte Hall continues to staff above the state and new federal standards of a minimum of 3.48 total nurse staffing hours per resident day of nursing care. On page 10, as of December 2024, Charlotte Hall received an overall rating of 1 star, with staffing receiving 3 stars, and health inspections and quality measures receiving 1 star each. The department should comment on the decrease in star rating and the strategies to improve overall ratings. An annual recertification survey report was submitted on September 30th, 2024. This survey noted that Charlotte Hall was not in compliance with some of the federal regulations. We request the department to brief on corrective measures taken to address these non-compliances. Another annual survey of Charlotte Hall's resident funds was conducted and no major issues were identified. DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting the continued submission of quarterly reports on Charlotte Hall's progress. On page 11, the second observation highlights the department's new Maryland Joint Forces initiative that was launched in November 2023. This initiative aims to address 5 pillars: employment, food and housing, education, health, and volunteer services among veterans and military families. Currently, 20 organizations have joined this initiative and several events have been conducted. We request the department to provide updates on this initiative and its outcomes and the department's future plans. DLS also recommends adopting committee narrative requesting a progress report of this initiative. The third key observation highlights the strategic plan submitted by the Maryland Commission on Veterans and Military Families in accordance with Chapters 9 and 10 of 2024. The Commission's strategic plan aligns with the 5 pillars which were mentioned earlier and focuses on 4 major areas that are integrated: military civilian communities, sustainable employment opportunities, comprehensive higher education opportunities, and pathways to stability. On page 13 are DLS's 2 recommended actions. Pages 14 to 16 are appendices, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for our analysts? No question. Mr. Secretary, you can come on up with your team. Let's identify everyone before we get started. Great to see you.
Very good to see
I have
you
a
too, sir.
document for you, by the way. It's about a week old.
Sounds good.
I've, since we've had a change in leadership in the Veterans Caucus on the Senate side, so I got a document I need to get to you
Okay.
regarding that. So
Thank you very much, Senator.
welcome.
Chair Jackson and members of the subcommittee, for the record, I'm Tony Woods, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Veterans and Military Families. I'm joined by our Director of Finance, Elena Charland. I want to thank Yasho, our DLS analyst, for her thorough analysis and review of our budget request. Over the past year, it's been my privilege to lead DVMF in strengthening our services for Maryland's military-connected community. Our vision is for Maryland to be the best state in the nation to be a member of the veteran or military-connected community. We've processed over 5,000 VA claims free of charge, resulting in over $44.7 million in direct payments to veterans and reducing wait times at our service locations. We launched the first online application for the Maryland Veteran Trust Fund and awarded over $500,000 in grants to both individuals and to organizations. We've built the dedicated constituent services function And Charlotte Hall Veterans Home has achieved joint accreditation, which is a well-regarded industry standard. Our 5 veteran cemeteries provided a final resting place for over 3,000 Maryland veterans and their dependents, and we have worked to reduce our vacancy rate to just 9 pins now, or a rate of 7%, with active recruitments likely to reduce this rate further in the next few weeks. I'll close by saying we're in full support of the governor's allowance, and we very much welcome your questions that you might have.
I appreciate that. And before we get started, Mr. Secretary, I speak to the agencies who come before us who have been working diligently on their vacancies. So my predecessor would be proud. So
Yep, exactly.
we're checking the box with her on that as we move along.
We're always prepared for that question.
So we do appreciate that. I have a couple of questions before we head to this. But unfortunately, we had to replace the contractor at Charlotte Hall. And having been a part of the Veterans Caucus and leading it at the time, with the new contractor that's there, the previous contractor is now suing. And so I'm focusing on the $825,000. Can you tell me what type of support are you getting from the AG's office? So where's your support coming from? If we're looking at $825,000, we'd like to know.
Senator, you're absolutely correct. So we are anticipating a potential settlement. That's our hope. I'll, of course, be sparing in my comments because it is active litigation. The AG's office has been very collaborative with us in working on that. They did initially want to retain outside counsel to provide additional support who specializes in this type of litigation. But we do believe if we're able to reach a settlement, we will not have to leverage that support.
Okay, very good. Yeah, we can get to the end of that hopefully very soon. We'd appreciate any updates you may have for us.
Absolutely, Senator.
Secondly, Mr. Secretary, please update us on the progress with the new contractors. Obviously, we're at the beginning, but your plan, our plan to make sure that they're meeting their mark, and so we can get that 1-star away from
agree.
us.
One of the things I often point out is that, a facility can go from 5 stars to 1 star overnight. You can only increase the star rating based on inspections by the Office of Healthcare Quality Control, OHCQ. The facility was last inspected by OHCQ, a full survey, in February of 2023. And so you actually need multiple years of surveys to be completed and to make that progress forward. So it will be a long journey no matter what. But in light of that, we've always known that would be the case, and that's not an excuse to deliver 5-star quality service every single day. We were very proud that the VA, who also inspects the facility, came through, did a full thorough inspection, and noted no major tags or deficiencies. So that to us was a very significant mark of progress. OHCQ did a business office review, which there had been challenges in the past, and also found no major tags or deficiencies, but small things to work forward. Because of that, I was glad to see that that Pruitt Health moved forward with requesting a joint accreditation survey. And so that is as rigorous as a traditional OHCQ survey. They come in and they provide a joint accreditation. We've passed that and received that joint accreditation just in December. But a couple points to your question. So proactively eliminating our reliance on temporary agency staffing or nurses, that we think is one of the most important things that we could have done. And we really focused on correcting and making the salaries very competitive for the area. And now, as of September of last year, we've eliminated that completely. I think we can all imagine if you've got a person who's working a shift or a day or a week at the facility, they're not going to build a rapport and get to know the residents well. And so that, we think, is a key change. From there, providing employee training and retraining is incredibly important, and that's where you see those OHCQ quality measures, things like falls, hospital readmissions, UTIs, use of psychotropic medications. training and retraining and investing there with staff who is fully employed and full-time to the facility, that's where you start to see those measures change, and that's an area that we talk with Pruitt Health weekly on those. Actively monitoring at-risk patients in collaboration with our department via weekly meetings as well is important. Starting the procurement process for mock surveys. So again, while OHCQ works through their own backlog, making sure that we are always practicing and preparing for that and making sure we're delivering good care. Utilizing a quality improvement system, and so this contractor brought in an entirely data-driven approach to monitoring performance. We have full access to that, and we go resident by resident looking for anomalies, looking for questions, that we follow up diligently with them. So we're very, very proactive in working with them. They've been a good partner. We have a lot more work to do to continue to improve those numbers, and once we get our OHCQ inspection, we anticipate those rising.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Speaking of your partners, I know that the College of Southern Maryland has been doing a terrific job enhancing their nursing department as well as the other clinician positions that are there. Speak to your partnership with them as well.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful partnership. As you know, great school, incredible facilities. Had an opportunity to tour that and would encourage others to see it. We have a formal partnership with them where individuals who are interested in becoming CNAs or GNAs can actually work at the facility and receive pay while training at CSM. And so that has become a wonderful talent pipeline for us. And that is also true for the nursing program. And so eliminating agency staff really is going to rely on continuing, was reliant on those types of partnerships, and then making sure that we never have to use them again. We'll also rely on these partnerships.
It's terrific. They have, they touch the 3 southern counties, so it's a nice bastion of support. Last question for me right now is Women's Memorial. Women's Memorial, I think, is something that we've been looking at for a long time from a location standpoint to ramping things up. Just update us, please, if you would.
Absolutely. So the commission, which wrapped up its work last year, recommended a site in Southern Maryland, which we were very delighted to see. But then that commission concluded, one of the things that we'd like to do, and we want to bring this to the governor's office, is kind of learn from our experience with the Global War on Terrorism Memorial Commission that was stood up and did a pretty rapid process of developing that. I would like us to make a similar push to stand up another commission to see through the final phases of this work. So that would mean standing up a nonprofit or identifying a nonprofit that can receive funds to help with the sort of final stages. Now that we have a location, now we can start to work on collecting funds, getting design ideas, working with artists to establish that, and then moving forward with design and build of a memorial. But I think it is incredibly important in this day and age when we sort of see attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. I like to point out when a veteran sees themselves represented in service, they are more likely to come forward and take advantage of their benefits. Women veterans are far less likely to say yes if you ask, are you a veteran? That's why it's so important that you ask, have you ever served in the military? Absolutely. And you get a different answer. And I think a Women's Memorial, along with any other group that is underserved by the VA, it's always helpful when they hear their stories represented and see their work represented and know that we're proud of what they did for our country.
Absolutely. That's a true milestone. And another one of our predecessors who's now serving as the interim county executive of Baltimore County would be very happy. Yeah. She was happy when the location was identified and the ongoing work. So thank you very much. I'm going to start with Senator Saul.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank the Secretary.
Thank you, Senator.
For all the information. I want to thank you also working with our Veterans Caucus. It's good to have that relationship, but always those conversations that always should be priority for our veterans. Absolutely. And for services that are needed. And I'm sure one of our concerns is the ongoing inspections that will go on at times at Charlotte Hall. And we want to know the information when it goes forward how much more maybe we need to do, possibly working with Chairman and yourself, and see what more we can do to help and assist that. We don't want to go back to the place where we were. We want to continue to improve. And again, our star rating is important to us.
Yep.
And just want to say, anything we can do, we're here with you. We want to support that in any way that we can as this committee.
Absolutely. Senator, I appreciate that. And appreciate this body for stepping up and stepping in right away when we recognize that, none of us should have been caught by surprise in the way that we all were. And you all stepped in to make sure that transparency is a priority and is going to be adhered to. So we have worked every single time there has been any form of inspection to comply with the law. Pruitt Health has complied with the law. We have therefore updated not only the House and the Senate, but the governor's office as well. And so timely reporting and making sure that goes through. We actually worked last year with you all to expand that to include an even wider range of because most folks think OHCQ or the VA, and that's important. But there are fire inspections, there are local health agency inspections, there are inspections of kitchens, those types of things are also relevant to our efforts to understand how well we're doing. And so I was glad to see that expansion, and we now include those as updates to the Senate and to the House as well.
Thank you. And one more thing that I believe we need to be looking into, and thankful that we have the Baltimore County facility for veterans there. Kate, do you have any information on how well that's going?
Are you talking about the Sykesville, Senator? So one of the challenges that we've encountered, the good news is we're actually moving forward with design and engineering work. So June 30th, we will have detailed plans that could then, in partnership with DGS, go to market and identify a firm who could build the home. So we're continuing to work forward with that and as well as environmental assessments. So that work is continuing. Unfortunately, at the federal level, there's now a $1.2 billion backlog in VA's construction budget, and it has not been funded. The last time it was funded, or what they sort of a catch up or a sweep up, was in 2018. So that could be a sign that they are close to doing the same thing, but we've seen no indication that the federal government is going to move on funding this. As you know, they're going to provide $118 million of this, whereas the state would provide $63 million. And so we're working very closely with the Department of Budget and Management on this. I think you probably saw in our capital budget, we removed that $62.9 million from the DPA. As painful as that was, and we were in very close talks with the governor's office and DBM on this, we all agreed that because the federal government has not moved on this, it doesn't make sense to have $63 million in real cuts to real programs that Marylanders need every day. And so, but one of the things I was reassured about this is, as Secretary Grady also mentioned, if by some miracle the federal government moves and funds that, we can go back to them immediately and see if we can reverse that decision. And so I'm confident we'd be able to.
Well, I appreciate that. I see from the budget itself, there's no special funds. It's just directly from the state and federal. So if there's something maybe possibly we can do to move forward, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
And one of the options we're exploring, Senator, and I'll keep it very quick, is that many states move forward with just building the home and then getting the reimbursement. So that is an option that is open to the state, is funding it up front and then getting that $118 million reimbursed. So that's something we're going to work with DBM to see if that's an option we'd like to explore.
Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move to Senator Lewis-Young, Mr. Secretary, you began to speak about your federal relations. And so one of the questions we've asked every agency when they come before us, any updates since January 20th, where you are with any projects that you have going?
So in terms of potential funding that is at risk of any changes, of course, we just mentioned the form of the funding for the Sykesville home would be a grant. So we're, of course, very closely watching any changes to that. Our cemetery program is, if a veteran or a dependent is buried there, we receive a plot allowance, which is a repayment from the federal government. And so that is, of course, a key part of our operations there. It is the only way that those spaces are funded. And then, of course, Charlotte Hall Veterans Home. Each veteran receives a myriad of payments to help fund their stay there. And the most important one of those, of course, is their VA payment. And so any disruptions to those things could have very significant impacts. We've done our estimate. It's about $30 million per year in exposure, which is actually quite significant. I'll say Governor Moore was quite clear to the cabinet shortly after the election and after this transition to the new administration. We have an obligation to partner with, collaborate with, work with, in any way we can with the Trump administration, and we absolutely will. We're starting next week. I've got a meeting with the person whose job it is to essentially build relationships with each state. And so we're going to be working collaboratively to make sure they're aware of the risks, the challenges, and the potential disruptions to the benefits that our veterans have earned.
Yeah, thank you very much, and please keep us informed. As you move
Absolutely.
forward. Senator Lewis-Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you just asked my question.
I didn't know who got the assignment from Senator Roosevelt.
So 30% of your budget is funded by the federal government. We make budget decisions based on the best information we have today. And not only don't we have great information today, in many cases, we don't have any information today.
And it changes every day. Yeah.
Yesterday, it was announced that 1,000 employees from the Department of Veterans Affairs would be laid off. And what we're seeing is not necessarily surgical corrections, but draconian cuts. And this pattern seems to be continuing and getting worse. So I think you in part answered my question, which is, do you have a worst case contingency plan? Are you starting to work on that?
There's several ways to answer that, Senator, but you're spot on in your observation, and your information is quite your question, and your intelligence is accurate, I would say. Many folks don't realize that the number one employer of veterans in the state of Maryland is the federal government. And so, according to the Partnership for Public Service, 30% of the federal workforce are veterans. That is a result of I think it's almost a 20-year DEI initiative, which is Veterans Hiring Preference, which has resulted in wonderfully skilled veterans being hired across the federal government. You're correct. We are starting to hear about the impact of these sweeping layoffs, which you're right, were not surgical. I've seen examples of 988 responders who do suicide prevention work being laid off. I've seen examples of claims of individuals who handle veteran claims, which helps to reduce the backlog. They're being laid off. We're seeing offers rescinded across the VHA, the Healthcare Administration, which will have an impact on wait times and appointment times and quality outcomes for healthcare. So the impact is sweeping across our community. We're paying very close attention to it. The Department of Labor has a very good website for federal employees who are impacted, of course, unemployment insurance. I always like to make a plug for anyone who's listening. We also have the Maryland Veteran Trust Fund, which can provide emergency assistance grants to individuals who might, for example, experience or be at risk of foreclosure or eviction, or utilities being cut off, car repossession. But it is quite significant, and we're very concerned. We will absolutely keep you updated as we learn more, but the impact is already starting to be felt. I'll add one very quick thing as well. Military spouses are another community that is being disproportionately impacted by this. They often move every 2 to 3 years. The federal government is a wonderful workplace for our military spouses, and if you move to a different location or change roles, you become a probationary employee again.
Absolutely.
Even if you're 15, 20 years into your career, but you have moved to a new job or a new role. And so we hear stories every day. We're trying to assist. We do remind folks that thanks to the Family Serve Act, which you all passed last year, a military spouse, along with veterans, have preferential hiring opportunities here in the state, in our state government, roles. And so that's another outlet, but it's a huge impact, and we're monitoring it very closely.
Absolutely, that adds to our concerns. You know, I've sponsored for a couple of years trying to get the licensure to be accepted from different states.
Yep.
And so this also adds to that they become a probationary employee. So you good?
I'm finished, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator.
So, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for mentioning the Veterans Trust. You know, your predecessor was able to get the legislators as a part of that, and we can't say enough about what that does for the families.
Yeah.
But that's something that we're very mindful of as well, what that means when the assistance comes to the families in addition to the other citizens that are in our state. So I think we're good. Are you good?
Thank you, Senator.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for your
Thank you,
response.
Senator.
We will be in touch.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
have a great weekend.
You too.
Thank you. That concludes the hearing for. No, she was there. I'm sorry, we do have a witness, sorry. No, that's the next one. That's right. So we're good. Next up will be the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. And our analysts, we're going to start.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is David Herbert. I'm here from the Department of Legislative Services to present the Maryland Department of Emergency Management's Fiscal 26 Allowance. Chapter 287 of 2021 established the Department of Emergency Management, or MDEM, by combining the Maryland Emergency Management Agency from the Military Department and the Maryland 911 Board from the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. MDEM is responsible for coordinating federal, state, local, and private resources throughout the state during times of disaster or emergency. MDEM also administers several grant programs supporting local and volunteer emergency service organizations. The fiscal 26 budget decreases by $34.6 million, or 3.8%, to $878.5 million. Exhibit 1 on page 3 provides an overview of the allowance. About 80% comes from federal pass-through grants, 13% is from 911 grant pass-through to counties, and the remaining components include the state's share of the 911 grant, fire, rescue, and ambulance expenditures, personnel, and other operating costs. Exhibit 2 on page 4 lists federal funding by source, and the overwhelming majority is public assistance for presidentially declared disasters. Most of that specific grant is for the state's pandemic-related costs. Expenses that fall under this grant are submitted to FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which reviews and validates whether the costs are covered and then provides reimbursement. Moving to page 5, Exhibit 3 describes the overall decrease of $34.6 million from fiscal 25 to 26. This reduction is driven by a decrease of $36.9 million in special funds for the Maryland 911 Board to align more closely with anticipated spending. There are some increases that partially offset the reduction, including approximately $1.5 million for salary increases and associated fringe benefits, and $1.5 million for the AMIS grant program to support local fire, rescue, and ambulance services. Moving to page 6, there is a provision in the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act that would authorize the governor to transfer $9 million from the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund to the general fund. Exhibit 4 shows a number of grant programs that are funded by state matching funds and the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which MDEM uses or passes through to local jurisdictions, businesses, and individuals. On to page 8, the allowance contains 109 regular positions, including 2 new administrative positions in the State Disaster Recovery Division. As of December 31st, 2024, MDEM reported 20 total vacant positions, which is 9.9 vacancies more than necessary to meet the budgeted turnover in fiscal 26. Of these vacant positions, 5 have been vacant for more than 1 year. The Department of Legislative Services recommends deleting funding for the 2 new administrative positions. MDEM should instead reclassify 2 of the existing long-term vacancies. Page 9 discusses the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund, which is a special, non-lapsing fund with the purpose of providing low or no interest loans for local resilience projects that address the mitigation of all hazards, including natural disasters. This revolving loan fund was established as a result of the federal Safeguarding Tomorrow through Ongoing Risk Mitigation Act of 2021. This federal legislation established the Safeguarding Tomorrow revolving loan fund to capitalize state revolving loan funds. Any project that receives federal money from the Safeguarding Tomorrow revolving loan fund must be approved by FEMA. Exhibit 5 on page 10 lists the projects that have applied for funds from both the federal and state revolving loan funds. A proposed budget amendment for fiscal 25 would appropriate $11 million from Maryland's revolving loan fund for the Extended North Tunnel Project and the Maryland Avenue Culvert Project, both in Howard County. These two projects will be the first ever to receive money from the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund, and summaries of each project listed in the chart can be found in Appendix 2. After accounting for this $11 million withdrawal to fund the two projects, there will be a remaining balance of approximately $15 million. MDEM has noted that the number of applications for local jurisdictions was not substantial and indicated that the time and expertise required to develop a project proposal and application may have been too costly for some local governments. Going to page 11, MDEM reported in calendar 2024 that it was developing a 5-year plan for the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund. MDEM should comment on the status of the 5-year plan that it has been developing for the revolving loan fund and provide updates on the approved awards for the project applications listed in Exhibit 5. Additionally, DLS recommends amending the BRFA provision to increase the authorized transfer from the revolving loan fund from $9 million to $12 million. DLS also recommends adopting committee narrative requesting that MDEM submit a report on the revolving loan fund, including efforts taken by the agency to assist local governments with developing project proposals and applications for future federal awards. In November 2024, MDEM submitted a report on state and local cybersecurity efforts as requested in committee narrative from the 2024 Joint Chairman's Report. The budget committees were interested in learning more about the state and local cybersecurity grant program. This grant program is funded through the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and is jointly managed federally by FEMA and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. MDEM collects local project proposals and forwards them to the federal agencies, which review them to ensure eligibility. The grant program also requires the establishment of a state cybersecurity planning committee, which determines the amount of funding, if any, for each eligible proposal. Membership of the Cybersecurity Planning Committee can be found in Appendix 3. Exhibit 6 on page 12 shows the federal award, state share, local share, and non-federal match amounts, which come from the state and local cybersecurity grant program. The non-federal match amounts came from the local cybersecurity support fund. Exhibit 7 on page 13 lists the jurisdiction, project title, funding request, and federal fiscal 2022 funding received for each of the proposals that were awarded funding by the Cybersecurity Planning Committee. Among 38 projects that were deemed eligible by federal agencies, funding was distributed to 20 of them. A total of $1.1 million was awarded to local projects, $11,000 to MDEM for workforce training, and $1.8 million was awarded to the Department of Information Technology for shared services for local jurisdictions. MDEM should comment on when federal fiscal 2023 and 2024 funding will be allocated and provide fund allocations by local project and by purpose. DLS recommends adopting committee narrative requesting a report updating the budget committees on the status of federal fiscal 2023 and 2024 state and local cybersecurity grant program funding distributions and use of general funds in the local cybersecurity support fund, including the distribution of grant applicants and grant awards by jurisdiction. The report should provide a brief description of each project as well, and that concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much. Any questions for our analysts? See no questions? Come on up, sir. Great to see you.
It's good to see you.
You can proceed when you're ready. Just mention your name and your...
Okay, thank you. So Chair Jackson, members of the committee, thank you for having me here today. For the record, I'm Russell Strickland, Secretary of the Department of Emergency Management. I appreciate the opportunity to update the subcommittee on the department's activities and address the items contained in the operating budget analysis prepared by the Department of Legislative Services. I'd like to acknowledge David Purport, our new DLS budget analyst, for this fiscal year, who has worked hard to understand the intricacies of our budget in just a few short weeks. I'd also like to acknowledge Christina Jorge Tunyan, our DBM analyst, who, as always, has provided invaluable guidance throughout the fiscal cycle. Excuse me. Accompanying me here today is Deputy Secretary Chaz Eby, and in the gallery I have our Director of Mission Support, Chief Financial Officer, and our Legislative Officer who will be available to answer questions as needed. You have our written testimony which addresses each item as requested by DLS. To begin, I'd like to briefly highlight how MDEM has worked toward achieving our vision of a resilient Maryland where communities thrive. Over the last year, MDEM has activated the State Emergency Operations Center on a number of incidents stemming from a range of hazards with far-reaching consequences, including the Francis Scott Key Bridge response, weather events, including flooding and winter storms, the counter-strike information technology disruption, the general election inauguration, and most recently, the plane crash at Reagan National Airport. Our Joint Operations Center operates 24/7 to ensure we're ready to support state partners and local governments. We hired the department's first Director of Interoperability, Mr. Jack Markey, recently retired from the Frederick County Emergency Management, who will lead the state's public safety interoperability coordination to ensure efficient and effective communications is available before, during, and after emergencies for all of our public safety partners. That position is commonly referred to as the SWIC, of which I'm sure everyone has heard of it by that through the years. We published the first version of the Resiliency Toolkit, a one-stop shop for anyone looking for resiliency funding. It includes federal, state, nonprofit, and private sector funding sources to make it easier for communities who need support. We continue to make progress on the Mesonet system with 20 sites operational across the state. Maryland Mesonet System, a statewide network of real-time meteorological stations that transmit critical weather data to inform the National Weather Service of conditions on hyper-local basis and support alert and notification to the public of weather impacts. Every county in Maryland has identified at least a potential site for a Mesonet station, and all but 3 counties have at least one station operational. And lastly, while this is not a departmental achievement, I wanted to share how excited we are that Governor Moore has been appointed to the Council of Governors. It's a bipartisan group of state leaders tasked with strengthening state-federal partnerships on key national security, disaster response, and military coordination issues. I'm heartened and deeply proud that Maryland will have a voice on this council. Now, Governor Moore's appointment could not have come at a better time given the recent discourse and uncertainty surrounding FEMA, its funding to states, and the broader federal emergency management system. Chair Jackson, with your wealth of professional experience, you know that there are few more adept at doing more with less than emergency management. I understand the state's current fiscal picture and fully support the strategic priority investments for the governor made in this budget. You have our written response to the DLS analysis, but there are 2 recommendations recommended by DLS that I want to bring the committee's attention as I think will negatively impact the emergency management system in Maryland. First, the State Disaster Recovery Fund. The Department of Legislative Services has recommended removing 2 new PINs and associated funding from the State Disaster Recovery Fund. As we demonstrated in our written testimony, all of the vacancies in the department that are open longer than a year are in process of being reclassified or filled with candidates selected for 3 of the 4 vacancies. The positions of the State Disaster Recovery Fund are critical to developing and administering the program at the state level. Given the significant level of uncertainty surrounding the future of the Federal Emergency Management Agency and federal disaster aid, the department respectfully requests the committee maintain the positions and funding in the governor's allowance for the State Disaster Recovery Fund. Second, the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund. The governor's allowance reduced the Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund by $9 million. And as I mentioned in my earlier testimony, we are supportive of the strategic investment decisions made by the governor and his allowance for fiscal year 26. However, the Department of Legislative Services has recommended a further reduction of an additional $3 million, which I think puts resilience funding at risk for Maryland communities. Federal changes in hazard mitigation and resiliency programs could significantly reduce the state's opportunities for funding for critical projects like flood reduction, coastal resilience, and environmental justice initiatives. And, while the department has been highly successful in getting awarded grant funds under the FEMA's companion program, the Safeguarding Tomorrow Revolving Loan Fund, the STORM Act, we do not have cash in hand yet. Given the administration's actions in clawing back other FEMA-administered funds, I believe there is a risk that federal funding awards may be revoked, leaving the department unable to meet current or future demand for resiliency funding through this program. The Resilient Maryland Revolving Loan Fund is an important part of the state's overall investment to reduce disaster risk for communities and is an important strategic backstop against loss of federal funding. Even if federal funding is not altered significantly in the next year, a further reduction will jeopardize Maryland's ability to seek new STORM Act funding, as we may not have enough of the required match to leverage available funds from the feds. We respectfully request the committee reject the additional reduction proposed by DLS in the analysis. I thank the committee for the opportunity to speak to these concerns. I and our staff are here available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I want to take a point of personal privilege to thank you for hosting my colleague at Homeland Security the other day. She was up with your team, Dr. Badmickens, and she's on the EM side, so I do appreciate that. I believe that she may, and a group of emergency managers may be up again on the 6th of March.
Great.
I believe.
We'll look forward to that.
And so with that, make use of your time while you have them here to go around to meet with their representatives to make sure that they understand, who and what you are. The agency, some know about it, but some don't. And it's a relatively new one. It's one of the best decisions I think the legislature has made, and in the recent past. So just make sure your folks are touching. I would encourage also to reach out to our analysts to further discuss those two cuts that you want to make sure you have documentation for. What I will say is that we move forward in the budget process and in making the determination on appropriation of dollars and what we do in this, a little bit challenging times that we're in, is that, everything you will be receiving, and all agencies will be receiving the request for more reporting going forward as we move forward. So before we go around to the other members, thank you for speaking to the, we have a question for everyone regarding the federal impact, and to look at your budget and understand that you're probably the hardest hit in the state, dealing with federal government budget. So, we are your partner. We always have been. We will continue to be. And so keeping us in the loop is more important than ever, to letting us know exactly what we need. I'd like to ask you a question, and this is going to come up in our meeting with MDE and DNR and some others. A couple years ago, a few years ago when I first joined this committee on this side of the street, and we picked up the environmental piece of things as well under the public safety umbrella, committee umbrella. We found out that we had an enormous amount of dams, private dams in our state. So talk to us about how you all are engaged as these private dams and others have been identified, and what that truly means, with the different, the recent weather that we've exhibited here in our state, and that we're going to see more of. So could you talk to us about that and the need for partnerships there?
I can, and it is a partnership with the Maryland Department of the Environment. They are responsible for dam safety, and they're responsible for providing to us from the owner of the dam, the safety plan for it and the disruption kind of plan for that. So we're very well connected on that. And then through us to the Federal Emergency Management Administration is the dam safety program that has grants available, the assistance program for that. So we work very closely with them through all of that. And we have had a couple that I can think of off the top of my head this past year that we had issues with, that, you know, both MDE as well as we were involved to rectify what the situation was.
Any recent conversations with the federal government on any pending changes to anything yet? I know things change every day.
Changes, quote unquote, I won't say, but hot off the press today, we've been notified by the Federal Emergency Management Administration that our drawdowns on all of our grants, to include even the disaster grants, is on hold. That's a cash flow issue for everybody.
Absolutely.
So we'll be working with that, and Chaz has been working with that this morning, and FEMA just trying to get the facts and exactly what the steps are going to be for this, whether it's a temporary hold until, you know, it's reviewed, or whether there's a chance that we may be losing some of the federal funding.
Hopefully just a temporary hold
Yes.
until March 14th. So I'll also say one of the things that we'd like to know, because you have so much of your funding that's dependent on the federal government, should the statement that was made that funds would be dispersed to the states, are you all working on the formula that's necessary to ensure that the state of Maryland can be in good
Yes,
stead?
and that's actually a discussion that's been held, the whole time I've been in this position on the national level, we've talked about that, is that if instead of FEMA necessarily doing certain things, they would take more of a federally supported, state-managed, and then locally executed action with that. And what the states have basically said, and the challenge there is every state is different. You know, we in no way, shape, or form are comparable to California, Texas, or Florida, North Carolina, or even Tennessee for, you know, the amount of resources and assets they have within their state because of the challenges they've had in those states. But what we have said is that the thresholds for handling a disaster may be much better at the state level. But in order to do that, the emergency management preparedness grants that we receive need to increase so that we can have our preparatory actions ready so that we can handle a disaster up to whatever amount of money that might be.
Yeah.
So it's something we actually are interested in it from the Maryland perspective, and it's something that I think that with the appropriate contracts in place, we easily could do.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, keep us informed how we can help.
We'll do that.
And we're definitely here to help you. We all good? All right, so a couple of things. So we get homework assignments in this committee. So we're missing a partner today. So one of the assignments is that you pretty much addressed the federal piece. So the second is AI. How are you all incorporating AI into your the business that you perform?
Well, that's a timely question too, because I'm very active with the Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology, working on a group to focus on how AI can assist within the emergency management community. And it's basically building out the technology that would be the next generation of emergency management reporting. We are working diligently on that, supporting it and the security around it. With the change in administration in Washington right now, we're on a little bit of walking on eggshells with that and trying to see exactly how that's going to shape out within science and technology. But we have literally formed a group of national partners who would ready to jump in and work on something like that.
Absolutely. Also on the list, I see another former colleague from Prince George's Homeland Security. He's over at OITC doing the cyber, David Lewis. So he was a contract employee, which was great that he found a full-time piece. So Senator LaShawn.
I want to follow up on that AI question, thank you. There has been a lot of publicity around the fact that the federal government is planning on increasing utilization of AI. In fact, to replace many of the jobs that have been eliminated. So if the federal government is developing AI, and we as a state are developing AI, how do they work together or work separately? I don't know enough about AI to understand that.
And in the big picture of things, that would be more of a question for the Department of Information Technology across the board. I can say that within the realm of state emergency management, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and within the U.S. Department of Homeland Security is where we are focused.
Right.
And coming up with, ways and means and how we can go about it. And it's in the infancy stages right now. Although we have also piloted one program with what they call lifelines, and that has some AI in the background with it. And the thing to keep in mind with that particular program, it's isolated to the databases it's entering, so it's not going out on the web and searching everything it can find. It's only going to very clear defined databases so that we can bring it back, post it, and we can share it amongst jurisdictions.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're very, I'm smiling from ear to ear on that one. Yeah, I've been waiting for him to retire for a few years.
Who are of service in our great state. And so it's great to see
We
that we
do.
retain him here. So.
We have an incredible organization of truly dedicated people who care.
Absolutely.
And that's their bottom line, is we care.
All right, cool.
thank
Always great to see you and your team.
Thank you.
See you. We have one witness. I apologize, I missed the witness for Veterans Affairs. I will get you after the witness, Mr. O'Malley, if you could come up. Brian O'Malley? It's not here, so we're gonna go to, Mr. Secretary, your hearing is concluded.
Mine, that's what I thought.
Yeah. Thank you all. Take care.
So I need 3 or 4 of them to make sure.
I got you. Let's see. Take care. So we could have Mr. Rodney Dickerson come up. I do apologize. Sorry about that, sir. And speaking regarding Department of Veterans and Military Families, you may proceed when you're ready. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Rodney Dickerson, an employee of the Department of Veterans and Military Families, a veteran, and a proud president of ASME Local 1867. Our department plays a vital role both in honoring our fallen heroes with the respect and dignity they deserve and in supporting those who are still here, veterans facing homelessness, mental health struggles, financial hardships, and challenges of reintegration into society. We are their lifeline, but we are stretched thin. Our outdated and unreliable equipment makes it harder to meet the needs of the veterans and families we serve. Our dedicated staff are working more with less, and we are losing talented individuals to industries that offer better compensation, leaving us with fewer hands to do the work. In addition, Charlotte Hall, which is now privatized, we believe should be brought back in-house. State employees have provided the ability to do the work and do the work better. But the most heartbreaking part of this is that our veterans, the very individuals we serve, are still falling through the cracks. We hear their stories every day. The veteran living in the car, the one struggling with invisible wounds, too proud to ask for help, and the veteran drowning in financial hardship after serving a country that seems to have forgotten them. What if we could invest in the resources and support systems that prevent these tragedies before they happen and increase the pay for staff at the veteran cemeteries who are underpaid, and some are veterans themselves? What if we cared for them not only in death, but in life? This is our opportunity to act. We must secure the funding to replace outdated equipment and underpaid staff and provide the critical support our veterans need. But to do this, we must also look at the bigger picture. We need to find ways to increase revenues in the state. Without sustainable funding, we cannot continue to provide the services the veterans deserve. This is more than a funding request, sir. It's a call to action. Because serving those who served us is not just our responsibility, it's our moral duty. Thank you for this time.
Thank you for your service. I understand you completely. I'm a vet as well, and I led the Veterans Caucus, still a member, it's our vice chair right here. Do you have your statement in writing that you can pass on us? Thank you. And we'll certainly take that into consideration.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for being
Thank you.
here. I apologize again for skipping over you.
No worries. Can I give it to you?
Yes, you can just, and we'll get it to the analysts. Thank you very much. Take care. All right, we're going to be moved to the Department of Transportation, Maryland Transit Administration. Our analysts will get us started. Mr. Secretary, see you again.
Thank you. Sam Quist from the Department of Legislative Services, presenting the analysis of the budget for the MDOT Maryland Transit Administration. On the beginning of the report, you can see the fiscal 2026 budget increases by $71 million to $1.3 billion. And on page 2 is a summary of the capital budget for MTA. This increases by $59.9 million to a total of $753.8 million. I'm going to turn to the performance analysis section of the report. Beginning on page 7, these charts are showing MTA ridership data. You can see that since the COVID-19 pandemic, MTA ridership has gradually recovered over the last couple of years. In fiscal 2024, ridership increased by about 11%. However, as this chart shows, ridership is still fairly lower than where we were pre-pandemic. Fiscal 2024 ridership represents only about 60% of boardings in fiscal 2019. On page 8 of the analysis, Exhibit 2, this is showing data on-time performance by MTA transit mode. As shown here, on-time performance ranged from a high of 94% for mobility paratransit services to a low of 73% for MTA bus service. On page 9, Exhibit 3 is showing MTA farebox recovery data. Farebox recovery is the percentage of operating costs that are recovered through passenger fares. This was also impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic as a result of lower ridership and increased operating costs. You can see that compared to fiscal 2020, farebox recovery ratios have been significantly lower. In fiscal 2024, they ranged from a high of 12% for MARC train service to a low of 2% for Metro service. Pages 10 and 11 show some additional transit performance measures reported to the Federal Transit Administration for core bus, light rail, and Metro service. And on page 12 of the analysis, we're specifically looking at these measures for local bus service and comparing those to services in other comparable cities in the U.S. And as shown here, you can see that MTA bus service ranks favorably in 2 of the measures: operating expenses per passenger trip and passenger trips per vehicle revenue mile. The discussion of the fiscal 2026 operating budget begins on page 14. Exhibit 6 is showing a breakdown of spending. You can see about a little over half of the budget, 52%, supports bus operations. A little over a quarter of the budget supports rail operations. The remainder of the budget supporting statewide program operations and MTA administration. And then on page 15 and 16 of the report, there's a breakdown of the proposed budget changes. Starting out with the personnel expenses, these grow by about $37.1 million, including both salary increases and other salary changes, as well as a large amount for new positions in MTA. There's about 167 new positions funded in the fiscal 26 proposed budget, including positions for both transit reliability and deliverability and MTA police positions in preparation for opening of the Purple Line. Under non-personnel related operating expenses, the largest area of change here is in transit service contracts for paratransit services, commuter bus service, and MARC train. In total, these contracts grow by about $83.5 million. These increases account for inflationary increases to contracts, as well as specifically in the area of paratransit, accounting for projected increased ridership growth. And then there's a net decrease in the MARC train service contracts due to the cancellation of planned service expansion on that line that's in the budget. There's also a one-time fiscal 2025 deficiency appropriation that's shown on the bottom of this chart on page 16, $58.5 million. $48.6 million of that is represented in general funds. The remainder is in special funds for transportation trust funds. This one-time deficiency appropriation represents a settlement payment approved by the Board of Public Works in November related to litigation surrounding the State Center redevelopment project. On the bottom of page 16 is discussion of two provisions in the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act that impact MTA in future fiscal years. The first provision proposes to delay the mandate surrounding MTA procurement of zero emissions buses from beginning in fiscal 27 to instead begin in fiscal 2032. The second provision expands the allowable uses of grant anticipation revenue vehicle or GARVI bond funding that is set in statute to include not just the current allowable uses specified in statute, but expand that to include funding of rehabilitation of the light rail system in Baltimore. And in the capital program, there is a funding plan set out that includes GARVI bond funding as a source of funding for that project. On the top of page 17, the analysis touches on the local operated transit system program and funding. There was a new mandated appropriation that went into effect in fiscal 2026, which set a minimum annual funding level for that program at about $80.5 million.
Excuse me. If you're not here for the Maryland Department of Transportation hearing, we're going to ask that you step outside for a minute. We have limited seats, and if you can't find seats, we'll make sure you get in as soon as we can, all right? So everyone has to take a seat. So if you can't find a seat, I'm going to have to have you step outside, so. All right, thank you all. Proceed, sir.
So effective in the fiscal 26 budget year, the LOTS program would be mandated at an appropriation annually of a minimum of $80.5 million. However, the budget in recent years and in fiscal 26 already funds the program at significantly higher than this level. So in effect, this provision would basically set a floor for the program to prevent funding reductions in future fiscal years. The analysis is asking MTA to briefly comment on changes to the LOTS program funding formula that went in effect in fiscal 2025, as well as that mandated appropriation. A summary of the MTA personnel is shown on the bottom of page 17 and the top of page 18. As of January 1st, the agency had about a 7.4% vacancy rate. And then we break out a little bit more detail of the new positions proposed in the budget. As mentioned previously, Across the operating and the capital budgets, there are 171 new positions in the operating budget. This accounts for 167 of those. And then there's a breakdown there of the positions that are for improving reliability and delivery of existing transit services, as well as the new MTA police positions related to the Purple Line. Discussion of the MTA capital budget begins on the bottom of page 18. And on page 19 is a list of federal discretionary grant funding that has been both received by the agency and applied for from federal fiscal 21 through 24. MTA received over $77.2 billion in federal discretionary grants during this time period. You can see there were two large grants that make up a majority of this funding, grants for the Frederick Douglass Tunnel Project, as well as the Susquehanna River Bridge replacement. In addition to funding received already, MTA has also applied for approximately $29.8 million in additional federal funding. On page 20, Exhibit 9 is a breakdown of the capital spending by year for the 6-year CTP period, and this is showing the spending by category. So over the 6-year period, there's about $5.7 billion in program capital spending. By category, about 57% of the 6-year capital spending goes to system preservation. On page 21 and 22 is a list of all the individual capital projects in the budget for fiscal 2026. So you can see that breakdown. The largest areas of individual project funding at the top of this chart are for the Purple Line, as well as development and engineering for the Red Line project. And then on page 23, there begins a discussion of capital cash flow changes. So Exhibit 11 is basically showing the changes in the capital cash flow from the 25 budget as introduced, the current 25 working appropriation, and the 26 allowance. And then the charts on the following pages are giving a specific breakdown by individual project. So pages 24 and 25 are showing the changes by project for the fiscal 25 budget as introduced to the current fiscal 25 working appropriation. And then similarly on pages 26 and 27, there's a project breakdown for the 25 working appropriation compared to the 26 allowance data. Pages 28 through page 30 are showing the data in the capital budget for first year construction and design funding. Exhibit 14 is basically showing a comparison between first year and ongoing funding in the capital budget. So you can see about 16% in the fiscal 26 capital budget is first year funding for construction or design. And then on pages 29 and 30, there's a breakdown for individual projects receiving first year construction and design funding in fiscal 25 and 26. Exhibit 16 on page 31 are showing two projects that are moving from the development and evaluation program to the construction program in the CTP. These include the light rail modernization program and the Susquehanna River Bridge replacement project. The major issues discussion of the analysis begins on page 32. The first issue that is discussed is an update on two major transportation projects, the Purple Line project and the Red Line project. The Purple Line project, as you may recall, last year there was discussion about a couple of modifications to the P3 agreement for that project, as well as delays to the project schedule. Currently, MTA has indicated that the projected opening date of that would be late calendar 2027. MTA has been providing bi-monthly construction status updates to the budget committees for the last couple of years. The most recent report that MTA submitted indicated that the Purple Line construction was about 74% complete. DLS is recommending committee narrative that the committees continue to request those bi-monthly status reports as major construction for the Purple Line continues. The analysis then goes on to discuss a little bit about the Red Line project in Baltimore. Last summer, the governor announced that the transit mode for that would be a light rail transit project. And on the bottom of page 33 and 34, there's a summary of three of the alternatives for the route of the project that are under consideration by MTA. The analysis asks MTA to comment on if it has any additional information to share on the status of the Red Line project, as well as where it currently is in the federal permitting process for that. Then on page 35 and 36, there's a discussion of two pieces of legislation that were enacted really recently related to service changes proposed by MTA and what studies and information MTAs are required to provide when it proposes service changes. Language in the budget bill last year restricted funding in both MTA and the Secretary's office, pending the submission of a report related to two local bus routes in Baltimore City. MTA submitted that report, and DLS determined that it contained all of the information that was requested for. Therefore, DLS is recommending that the funds that were restricted be released based on that report. On page 37 is the DLS recommended actions. The one recommended action, committee narrative, continuing to request status updates on the Purple Line report. For the capital budget, DLS is recommending to concur with the governor's allowance. And then the last item I'd like to point out, there's a series of updates in the analysis on a couple of items for your reference. The first is an update on the proposed solicitation of a P3 agreement for managing freight rail lines on the Eastern Shore. DLS conducted a pre-solicitation review of this last fall. And this continues to proceed, and MTA is indicating that the solicitation would occur later in calendar 2025. There's also an update on improvements in paratransit service metrics, which were discussed in last year's analysis. And lastly, discussion of two report updates that MTA is required to submit by statute in 2025, an update to the Central Maryland Regional Transit Plan, as well as the MTA Capital Needs Inventory Assessment. That concludes the DLS presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for our analysts? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, Madam Administrator, great to see you. Proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Jackson, members of the committee. Nice to see you again. For the record, Paul Wheatfeld, Secretary of Transportation. I'm joined today with Holly Arnold, Administrator of the Maryland Transit Administration. Thank you for the opportunity, obviously, to respond to the questions. And thank you, Sam, for the work that you did in preparing the document. As this committee knows, transit is a critical public service for riders across the state. It is essential to the economic success of the state. Every day, hundreds of thousands of Marylanders rely on MTA to access jobs, education, and a full array of life opportunities and needs. And over the past year, MTA has many accomplishments, and I'd like to just highlight a few to give a sense of the range of activities underway at the MTA. For example, MTA's MARC service, in collaboration with the Virginia Rail Express, the Virginia VRE, entered into a new agreement that cross-honors tickets between the two services. This allows MARC riders to access points south of D.C. at no additional cost and expands our regional connectivity, including for Virginians that want to use BWI Airport, that they can now use that MARC service to get there. In another example, in Baltimore, the agency helped grow the region's workforce when it launched a paid bus mechanics apprenticeship program and accepted the first 10 candidates. This effort will help to grow MTA's skilled workforce and create more well-paid jobs in the region, and we work very closely with the ATU in the Baltimore region to set that program up. And of course, MTA has focused on the growing transit service and access by focusing on major transit projects. One, obviously, is the Purple Line, which is 75% complete and received its first 7 light rail vehicles last year, and I think we've gotten one since then in this year. And earlier this month, we launched a grant program for small businesses impacted by the construction of the Purple Line. We're also committed to advancing the Baltimore's Red Line. These two major projects are part of many efforts designed to transform transit across the state. This is just a small sample of all the MTA has been working on over the past year, and your support of the governor's transportation revenue package. There's much more to come. Of particular note, the revenue package allows us to match available federal funding and fully fund the critical light rail modernization program in Baltimore. This $1.4 billion program will allow us to deliver the much-needed improvements to ensure the reliability of the system. And obviously, it does allow us to continue to pursue Southern Maryland Rapid Transit study as well, Mr. Senator. Now I will turn it over to Administrator Arnold to talk more about the agency's program.
Appreciate that.
All right. Thank you, Secretary. Good afternoon, Chair Jackson, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Holly Arnold, Administrator at the Maryland Transit Administration. I would like to thank Sam for his detailed review and analysis. It's been great working with him this year. As this committee knows, MTA has always been an economic engine within Maryland. In fact, 9 out of 10 trips that we provide are for riders who are going somewhere to spend or make money. Additionally, when you look at our service region's 1.2 million jobs, about half are accessible by train or bus, and the work that we do benefits employers statewide, with MTA supporting around 10,000 jobs on an annual basis. For a long time, our funding was not prioritized in a way that reflected the important role that we fill. However, I'm pleased to say that that's changed, and under the administration's proposed budget, we are poised to get MTA back on track and deliver the transit system that our state deserves. Ultimately, this means that we can maintain what was built, invest wisely, and better serve our riders. To that point, the proposed budget will help our efforts to tackle critical state-of-good repair projects like updating our MARC storage and maintenance facilities, overhauling and replacing our fleet of rail vehicles, and maintaining the annual replacement of our buses to keep our systems reliable. This funding will also support major capital investments, such as replacement of our full metro fleet and a new communications-based train control system, which is scheduled to start rolling out later this year. It includes our light rail modernization program, which will replace our existing fleet with modern, low-floor, accessible vehicles, improvements to the stations and maintenance facilities, and replacement of the outdated signaling system, and includes $213 million in federal awards. It ensures we meet our contribution to the Frederick Douglass Tunnel project, which will increase capacity and speed along the Northeast Corridor, which means better and more reliable MARC service. In Montgomery and Prince George's counties, we'll continue construction on the Purple Line, which now sits at over 75% complete, with revenue service scheduled to begin in winter 2027. In Southern Maryland, we're working closely with the counties to undertake the environmental study for the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit project. And at the same time, we're focused on advancing the Red Line, a much-needed transit line in Baltimore City that will create a more connected system, and we anticipate an alignment announcement this year. We have a lot of exciting stuff planned, and I can guarantee that MTA knows how to deliver. Over the past year, we've seen ridership grow 15%. We've provided over 68 million rides in 2024 and reached post-pandemic highs on all of our modes. We reduced our agency's hiring time by 40% and hired more than 400 operators for the second consecutive year. And I can tell you that when you ride the system, you do feel a difference, because we've reduced our core bus cut service from 12% down to under 2%, and our mobility on-time performance is now greater than 93% consistently. We've also invested significant time in developing our internal and prospective workforce through key agency initiatives. As the Secretary mentioned, this past August, in collaboration with the Baltimore County Community College, we launched our first paid apprenticeship program, where the 10 selected candidates are already learning the ins and outs of bus maintenance. We established MTA's Youth Transit Council, which is comprised of students across the state and is designed to elevate the transit needs of students throughout the region. And we graduated our second Emerging Leaders class, a program where up-and-coming leaders throughout the MTA come together to grow their skills and help us tackle agency challenges. It's been a busy year of hard work and progress, but there's much more to do. Transit remains critical to the long-term success of the region and the state. So once again, thanks to the effort of the Moore-Miller administration, transit in Maryland has a very bright future. So with that said, I do want to thank the entire team at MTA for their outstanding work. Turning to the DLS analysis, on the first issue, we were asked to comment on the new formula for our locally operated transit systems, or the LOTS. So MTA has been working on an update to the LOTS formula for several years. So one thing I do want to note, because we were asked a question like how the formula changed, there was no prior formula. There may have been at one point in time, but there's no one at MTA who knows what that was. And so essentially we gave the same funding year after year, despite changes in population, despite changes in service. And so we recognized that we needed to change that. So we've been working for a few years to develop a formula. And this new formula is really based on the intent of the federal funding that we receive through the Federal Transit Administration. So the intent of the federal agency partners is basically to help jurisdictions recoup some of the cost of the service that they provide, rather than trying to predict and provide for latent demand. So based on that, the factors of the lot service and service area that the formula uses to weight available funds are 30% for boardings, 30% for revenue vehicle miles, 30% for revenue vehicle hours, and 10% of population living in poverty within the service area. We did work extensively with the lots agencies to establish the formula. We allowed for review and comment, and we did make some adjustments based on those comments. The formula took effect in fiscal year 2025, and we have a 3-year grace period in which no jurisdictions will experience a decrease in operating funds, and we're going to continue to work with our lots agencies to make adjustments as the formula is rolled out. On the second issue, MTA was asked to comment on the timeline for the red line alignment and NEPA completion. So we currently anticipate announcing the alignment in 2025 this year and completing the federal NEPA process in fall of 2026. So with that said, I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you very much to the both of you. A couple things before we go around the horn. One, you mentioned the intention of the dollars that are coming from the federal government. So is that intent based upon your customers' requests and the agency requests, or is that federal intent?
So it's based on the federal formula intent. And so the federal formula basically looks at how to kind of recoup some of the costs that are being spent on operations and capital rather than trying to identify where new demand might be. FTA does have you basically self-fund your own service for the first 3 years. And when it starts reporting into the National Transit Database, that's when the funds kind of start flowing.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And just a quick follow-up. So is there a point in time where if there are some changes that you have some input, that you have the ability to, weigh in because things changed? So I just want to make sure that there is a partnership there.
Absolutely, yeah, no, and we fully recognize the needs and some of the struggles of the lots, and so we want to be good partners there, working closely with our federal jurisdictions, and at any time there's a notice of proposed rulemaking, we'll make sure that we're coordinating very closely to have MTA's needs and the lots needs both represented through that.
Absolutely, and from a formula standpoint, could you kind of walk us with you as you're rolling that out? The formula, you just began it, so we would certainly like to be held abreast of. You have a mixture of folks that are on this committee. We're representing the state, literally, Western Maryland, Southern Maryland, Central. So yeah, if we could do that, we'd appreciate it. Lastly, for me, for now, EV challenges, anticipated challenges with your buses because of the announcements made, a couple months ago.
So MTA in the BRFA is proposing to delay the full transition to electric vehicles. So that's part of what we're looking at here and what's built into the budget. We currently have 7 electric vehicles that are on property and are in service right now. We have chargers to support them. Our maintenance folks have been trained on those buses. We have 20 more that we're going to be getting this year and 20 more that we're going to be getting next year. So we will have a fleet of 47 electric vehicles, which will allow us to kind of pilot, test it out, see how it continues to go. And we're going to be carefully and closely monitoring what it looks like at the federal level, what it looks like across the industry, and I think can make the best decisions as things continue to roll out.
Yeah, and to ensure that we have no delays or any impacts, as we're doing that. So we do appreciate that. So I have one more last question. Right. So you mentioned the Baltimore Community College. So do you all have a schedule of your apprenticeship programs going forward with the other 15 or so community colleges across the state? Is there a schedule that you have planned? If you do, or when you formulate that, we would love to know that.
I'll pull one together because it actually goes across a number of modes. So let me put one that's DOT-wide, not just MTA.
Absolutely, yeah. As we all know, we have some very young, very bright, innovative minds out there who certainly need to be exposed to what you all do. So, all right, thank you. Senator Rosepet.
Thank you. Good to see you again. I got 2 questions. One, starting with the chart on page 7 about ridership. I want to just ask kind of the big picture question. Obviously, ridership went way down during COVID. It's been coming back up, but I can't quite figure out which line is which. But in general, it doesn't look like we're getting back to pre-COVID levels. So we're now a couple of years out from the end of COVID. So kind of what's your big picture thinking of the future of ridership?
Yeah, so we are continuing to see increases in ridership. And it depends very much on the mode. So I will say kind of our core modes, bus, metro, and light rail are high 70s, low 80s in terms of kind of pre-COVID ridership. Mobility is fully recovered and has actually exceeded COVID ridership. And our commuter modes, MARC and commuter bus, are the ones that are lagging quite a bit behind. We're looking at our service constantly to better align with demand. And one of the biggest things that we've seen is there's all-day demand for service. There's weekend demand for service. So, we mentioned that MARC ridership is lower during the week, but we are seeing a higher ridership recovery on the weekends. Like, people want to use it for all types of trips and not just work trips. So as much as possible, we're looking to how do we make those adjustments? How do we have the service in the right place at the right time for our riders, and continuing to adjust that. I will say on MARC and commuter bus as well, we are still kind of looking as some of the federal workers return to office full time. I think we've had 2 weeks of that kind of, but there's still more agencies that are continuing to go back. I don't think we'll have a full picture of what that looks like until probably mid to late March. And so we're really closely monitoring that. Again, on MARC in particular, there are some trips that are pretty full, they're at capacity. There's other trips where we still have a lot of room. And so we're just closely monitoring, and we'll be adjusting service based on what we see in terms of ridership.
No, that's helpful, but let me ask you, is there any reason to believe that we'll get back to the same level of commuter demand that we had before, or should we be assuming that it's going to stay below the previous peaks?
I think commuter demand will stay below, but I think the demand for transit and the demand for transit trips for all types of trips is going to continue to stay high. And so that's why the importance of us adjusting our service to be able to respond to all of those different types of trips is really critical.
I get the point you're making, but so your view, based on what you know now, and things can change obviously, is a commuter demand will probably stay below peaks for the foreseeable future.
Yes, I think work from home.
Right. Yeah, it changes a stick. I'm not for it or against it. I'm just trying to understand how you're thinking about that. Okay. So what is driving off-peak demand?
People need to go to the grocery store, go visit friends,
But they did
go to the movies.
before COVID too. I'm trying to understand. Do you have any insight from either surveys or anecdotal or academic studies or anything about why that be going on?
So I think the demand was there before. It's just the demand and the peaks really just outweighed it. And so we're not seeing huge peaks that we did before, right? So it kind of was dwarfed. And so now we're seeing it more pop up in the data as things are going on. I also know in Baltimore City, there's about 30% of people who don't have access to cars. And so we are all of their trips on MTA.
But is that demand gone up? Or you're just saying there was demand there and there's still demand there?
I think there was demand there. There's still demand there. But we are seeing, again, compared to the peaks where it was before, more folks are riding in kind of midday than they were previously.
Okay, thank you. The second question is related to the federal money. So the chart on page 19 is part of it. These are federal discretionary grants. So everything that's awarded is more or less in our bank account, or is a bunch of the awarded not in our bank account?
So many of the awarded funds are obligated in grants. Right now, we're closely monitoring, every grant that goes through. We're still getting reimbursements from the federal government, but I do know that they're looking at all of the programs. So I don't really have anything to update at this point. We're closely monitoring and seeing where we are, and as soon as anything changes, we'll be sure to let you know.
But I'm trying to think quantitatively.
So it's a reimbursement basement. So they don't.
Right.
So the Frederick Douglass Tunnel, they're not going to give us $4.7 billion and we get to spend it. We spend the money and then get reimbursed for it.
But the $7 billion is one total here. You may not know off the top of your head, but of the $7 billion, have we collected any of it?
Some of it, yes. But again, a lot of it is still for projects that are starting or yet to start. And so we're kind of, we will be at the needing to reimburse those projects.
Could you get back to us with how much money is at risk because we have not gotten the money?
We can come up with a number. I can tell you it's the vast majority of this number.
Okay. Okay. Well, it'd be helpful to actually get the number.
Sure, we'll do that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ooh.
have our roles. We all have our roles. So.
So I mean, I'd be happy to address AI.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just, for the folks in the room, so, the secretary is with us all the time, you know, but with the different.
Member of the subcommittee.
He is, yeah. It's like, and so for the different modes, the secretary is like, you know, we are engaging, but, you know, he'd also welcome us to ask the various administrators that come before us, so. Madam Administrator, if you
No,
could.
and I'm fully prepared to answer that question, so thank you. Yeah, I mean, so MTA is continuing, similar to all the other modes, like we're continuing to monitor AI as it's being rolled out. I'd also like to, I mean, I think we talk a lot about AI as this brand new thing, but MTA has really been using AI for a number of years for our scheduling. So mobility in particular, I think, is a good example where we don't build those schedules each night. We essentially use an algorithm, which is AI, to build the schedules and ensure that we're able to provide the service the next day. As we're continuing to make adjustments, again, that is AI that is assisting us with that. We use it on our core service as well. So we, again, use the kind of the benefit of the algorithms to help us build those schedules. We're constantly using the data that we get in through that to help there. We also, you know, have piloted a couple times, again, similar on like automatic vehicles. We've done some testing on if you could use it, like we still have our operators, but to help with parking. So you can park a little closer together. So looking at some of those options, which would help to, like we're pretty tight. We're at capacity in all of our garages. And so if you park the buses a smidge closer, can you squeeze a little bit more out of it? So we've piloted and are continuing to look at that. And then the one other piece that we're also looking at is, you know, a lot of folks on their websites and on social media use chatbots to answer questions and assist with some of those things. We are looking at doing a website redesign in the coming year and a half to make it more accessible. And so there may be some opportunities there to incorporate that as well.
So I would also say before we close, you know, we have these very bright, innovative minds that are out here, and you're engaging them on your apprenticeship side for your operations, but also, you know, when you're talking about AI and everything else. You know, we have a terrific university system, McEwa, as well as the MAC system and others. So bring them in, make them part of your, you know, state of Maryland.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate it. I don't see any. Oh, there we go.
Actually,
there you go.
Related another question on AI. Have you looked at AI in the context of training? Because there's a lot going on in education with AI, and I'm just curious whether you have to train people to do a lot of stuff.
Yes. I mean, I can check with our team. I know that they're constantly looking at things. We are going to be hiring for a new training director in the coming months, and so that will be one of the questions that we can incorporate.
Thank you.
That is a terrific. That's a terrific segue.
I'm just going to plug. We're hiring here.
There are some. Hey, look, and we're your partners, so we want to plug it as well. We all have the constituency of the entire state. But I will also say that, you know, Secretary and I have been in conversation, as well as Ms. Shackey, you know, about some pieces of legislation. You guys do a terrific job of partnering with us from the department side on pieces of legislation, and we try to partner as well on legislation that we have. So, you know, human trafficking. You know, we've been talking about that piece of legislation that's out there. Not to toot a horn over here, but it's important awareness. You guys have a terrific program throughout your entire system. You know, I use it often, and whether it's the airport or whether it's the train station or what have you, with you know, recognition of folks being aware of their surroundings, and so you know, as the senator mentioned, training in AI may be a tool for the future. So we thank you all again. Mr. Secretary, do we see you tomorrow or something? I don't know.
Thank you.
But have a great weekend. Thank you all very much. We have actually 16 testimonies that are coming up. 16. And so, Mr. Secretary, if you could, you know, if you could ensure that you all hear what's going on with this testimony from your folks. We would greatly appreciate that. So we're going to be, you can have a seat if you like, since you are a member. So we have 5 groups. All right. Okay. Okay, so we have 3 panels. So we're going to call them Anna Ellis. One up. Brian. No. Panic. Piennick. He may be outside. Paul Sturm.
Go ahead.
1 second. James Smith. I'm not sure we're crowded in here today, so. All right, appreciate that, Mr. Johansson. And Lauren Bird.
Bethany, should I just drag my chair up?
Yes, we're gonna try to, we need to make sure we get you on the camera, so.
Yes, sir.
So let's do,
Should I pull it up to
the first 4 people are staying here, and when you come to the mic, you have 2 minutes. Please state your name for the record. And so let's go with 4. Drag a chair up if you could,
Yes, sir.
and then you can proceed when you're ready.
Scoot over for me. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Just need to make sure I can get everybody on the camera, so please proceed, sir.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Anna Ellis. I am a lifelong Baltimore Transit rider, and I volunteer with the Transform Maryland Transportation Coalition and the Better Transit Now campaign because I want to see Maryland invest in a great public transit system. We don't have one now. The MTA budget that you were reviewing affects people across the Baltimore region who use the bus, train, or MTA mobility to get to school, work, or medical appointments. Too often, it's unreliable. I've waited more than 30 minutes for a subway train that is supposed to run every 8 minutes. And on any given day, the MTA light rail has fewer than half of its rail cars in service, resulting in one-car trains and cut runs. The unreliable trains are a direct result of decisions made by governors in the legislature to postpone funding for state of good repair projects for the MTA. In comparison to the DC Metro, in 2016, the Baltimore subway broke down more than 4 times as often as DC's. By 2023, the Baltimore subway broke down more than 35 times as often as DC's Metro. This huge improvement in DC's subway service was due in part to the 2018 Maryland legislature passing the Maryland Metro Funding Act, which greatly helped reduce the DC Metro's breakdowns. Governor Moore's proposed transportation budget is a step in the right direction by making badly needed investments in the state of good repair of the MTA's train and bus systems. It includes fully funding the MTA light rail modernization project, which will replace the light rail cars by 2031. For that reason, I want to encourage you to approve the governor's proposal, but we need more. We need that and more. I ask you to support these investments and to continue to find more ways to invest in the capital needs of the MTA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and for those of you all who come up to speak, if you have your statement written, if we could, we would be willing to take that for the committee as we're making our budget decisions. So if you'd like to leave that to us or send us an email later, other choice is yours. So once you've spoken, we're gonna have to make room, ma'am, if you could. Thank you very much.
Excuse me.
You have to, you can just move the mic over where you are. Go ahead.
Are we good? Little musical chairs here. Good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
I'm Paul Sturm. I'm wearing 2 hats here. I chair the Downtown Residents Advocacy Network. In Baltimore, we have 40,000 residents downtown. A lot of us either don't have cars, or if we have cars, we would choose to use public transportation if we had frequent and reliable service. And this speaks, Senator over there, This speaks to the question you asked Administrator Arnold. I can tell you we have a lot of downtown residents who would love to trade their cars in for a Charm Pass, an app, if they knew service were frequent and reliable, which by and large it's not right now, or not to the extent. So there's just a huge market out there for transit if we had a better system. Other hat I'm wearing is I manage the Better Transit Now campaign. 2 weeks ago, we had the spectrum of Baltimore transit riders and stakeholders across the way in Lawyers Mall, and our message was this: our current unreliable transit system disadvantages current riders, discourages new riders, and really damages the entire Baltimore region. Baltimore is the only major city along the East Coast that's continuing to lose population, while our peer cities, Boston, Philadelphia, DC, New York, Atlanta, are gaining population. And a fundamental difference is this: although like those other cities, Baltimore has Major League Baseball and professional football, unlike those other cities, we do not have a major league public transportation system. We have a minor league public transportation system. So we urge you, of course, to support what Governor Moore has proposed in terms of reversing the cuts that were originally drafted in the CTP, but that is just not enough, because ultimately, and if I can just have a few more seconds. So of course, we know this is also a challenging budget environment, but we also know that government usually finds a way to fund what it values. And 4 of our sister states in the Northeast Corridor, specifically Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania, have either created new revenue sources to support transit in their largest urban areas, or have reallocated funds that were initially allocated for public transportation. I'm sorry, for other modes of transportation. So let me leave you with this. Please believe Governor Moore when he says Maryland cannot thrive unless Baltimore thrives. The Baltimore region is Maryland's population center, cultural mecca, and economic engine. It is truly long past time to value public transportation and the people who use or would like to use public transit in Maryland. We need better transit now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I gave you a few extra.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So let's be mindful, folks. We have 15 people, 15 or 16 folks. So, and if you could switch your seat out. We have some other folks that are coming up. You may proceed, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Lauren Bemi Bird, and I am a transportation community organizer for No Boundaries Coalition, which is a nonprofit based in Central West Baltimore. And we are an organization that does support the Governor's Move Coalition efforts, like Paul mentioned, the choice to put the funding back in the budget and request that we get a little more. But I'm here today representing myself as a single mother who lives in Park Heights. I have a 13-year-old daughter who is hopefully attending BSA in the fall for violin. And I have not had my own mode of transportation for the past 3 years. And so I've been primarily utilizing public transportation on the bus and the light rail. And the other day, a gentleman mentioned a statistic where they did studies where 100% of the jobs in the region were accessible using a car, but only 9% when you had to utilize public transit. My position as the transportation community organizer had a requirement for your own personal vehicle to get the job. They saw that I was the person for the position. In spite of that, I was actually able to utilize the mayor's Lyft services that they had during last year, where they were providing Lyft rides for people in new positions to help me in my job. But it is a major hurdle being someone who is trying to function day to day, take care of my child, advance my life, and move about in the city when most of my time has to be planned around waiting if the buses are not accessible. So we are asking for you all to actively support the funding of our system's advancement, accessibility, frequency. We need more buses. We need. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you very
Look,
much.
that buzzer comes at you quick.
Thank you.
I was like, and also.
Yeah, we got that here. So again, if any of you have anything you would like to submit in writing, please do so. We will accept it and we will review it. So,
Absolutely, and thank you, Mr. Chair and committee, for hearing me today.
absolutely, absolutely. All right,
All
sir.
right. Yeah. Good afternoon, Chairman Jackson and members of the committee. I'm James Smith, president of ASME Local 1859 MTA Police. I proudly represent a small and effective contingent of committed officers and civilians contributing to MTA services provided for Marylanders. I am here in support of MTA's proposed budget. This budget will allow for much needed repairs and improvements to MTA's conveyances. During our tour duty, serving citizens of Maryland and riders on the system, we see every day the need for these improvements. We know that transportation services MTA provides are vital for a large, diverse cross-section of Marylanders. To help keeping the system safe, there's a need for acquisition of new technology and equipment improvements. This budget proposal will allow for this, will allow for the start of this. It is critical that MDOT's budget be approved and implemented, as it will put the Maryland Department of Transportation and our state's economy on a path to achieve its goals. Failure is not an option. Alongside with our partners in the MOVE Coalition, look forward to working with you to achieve this important task.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for coming down as we do. Thank everyone, and also thank you for your service in law enforcement. So, thank you. Next panel, I'm going to just go down the list of names. I'm going to try to call Brian, again, Pinink. Okay, come on up. Come on up. Mike Johansson. You guys can get started.
Oh, I'm
2
sorry.
minutes, state your name.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Lester Davis, and here in two capacities, proud to be before the committee. One is a commissioner of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission, but in my capacity today as Vice President and Chief of Staff at Care First, who I have responsibility for our social drivers of health platform work. It's essentially our mission-driven work, and at Care First, we understand that 80% of what impacts total health really has to do with the environment and how folks move through that environment. It touches on things certainly of comprehensive transportation. And one of the stats that really struck us at the company was that if you live in the region and you need to get to a job and you have a car, you need to get to any job within 1 hour, you can do that no problem. If you rely on public transportation, it was that number went down to 9%. The most recent number is about 8.5%. So trending in the wrong direction. And so when we looked at Care First to start a comprehensive workforce development program to help community members place them with jobs, we need talent. We've got communities that are rich in talent. We decided to do that in West Baltimore near a transit hub so that folks could easily get to their place of employment and they wouldn't have to worry about being X'd out of opportunities because they did not have access to care. And so Care First is aligned with the Move Maryland Coalition. We respectfully request this committee's support for MDOT's budget and associated revenue adjustments to provide a safe and reliable transportation system that catalyzes the state's economic success. Without transit, there is no success. Critically, this budget supports the MTA, which provides a much-needed service for riders across Maryland and is imperative to the economic success of our state. The final CTP relies on an additional $420 million in new annual state revenues that total nearly $700 million, and you can leverage federal funds. So I just thank this committee and appreciate your work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here giving informational comments on behalf of Maryland's auto dealers. I appreciate, the dealers appreciate the need for transit. We appreciate that it needs to be part of the system. But I've heard the term investment quite a bit. And since I'm one of the groups that would be paying more in car taxes through a repeal of the trade difference, more in registration fees as far as car owners, I guess we'd be considered the investors in this. If you look at the information that the Secretary provided yesterday, the total operating and capital budget costs within this CTP in total is $3.1 billion in transit. That includes WMATA and MTA, and about $2.5 billion in roads, which includes highway user revenue, MVA, and the Secretary's office. Yet when we talk about the increase in taxes and fees on car drivers, car buyers, and car owners, what we've seen since the CTP last year versus this year is an increase in spending on transit to the tune of close to $1 billion and a reduction in spending on highways, which is a big piece of the road budget, to the tune of $500 million decrease. What we are concerned about is the rapid growth of operating spending. The WMATA budget increased over a 2-year period in operations, 39%. The transit budget operations increased over the same period in 2 years by 30%. That is in excess of $400 million. So what we're suggesting is a closer look at the spending. There wasn't one recommended cut in this $1.3 billion operating budget. I'd like to raise one just for consideration. Don't have a stake in it. There's 78 new police officers for the Purple Line. Wondering if there's some way to work with local governments to perhaps reduce the need for that number of officers. 10 stations in Montgomery County, 5 stations near College Park, and another 6 in Prince George's. Our effort is to reduce the need for higher car taxes, perhaps even to suggest that you don't need to raise the $140 million that the governor has proposed from car buyers. Thank you. I did submit some testimony.
I appreciate that.
All right.
Thank you all very much. Yes, Senator Roosevelt.
The car dealers, do you have suggestions of other revenue sources in place of the ones that you oppose?
Sure, I do. And I can get more specific. The first one is the delivery fee is either much maligned or loved. At 75 cents, it raises $225 million. At $1.25, it would fully fund the $140 million that they're seeking on behalf of.
Okay, so one is to go to a higher level on that.
Yep, that's number one. Number two is I've done a review of the gas tax projections. The Secretary's analysis suggests there'll be 1.1 million EVs by year 2030. We all have heard that the administration is slowing down EV incentives, eliminating completely, charging incentives completely. I did a back of the envelope analysis, happy to kind of share it because I don't have all the data assumptions, but my numbers suggest that's about $700 million short over 6 years, which is another $120 million a year in collections that is already built in there if you have a better assumption of EVs.
I totally didn't follow that math. Yeah. So you're saying there are going to be less EVs, so we're going to collect more money?
Yeah, because the way the budget is built today from the Secretary's document yesterday, which I didn't have, you guys have in your system, they're suggesting a huge decline in the yellow bar in gas tax revenues.
I see, and you're saying gas tax revenue is likely to stay up.
It's going to stay up because instead of one.
Now I understand.
Yeah,
that clarifies it.
You got it.
Okay. Come on back with 2 or 3 more when you get a chance.
I will definitely do that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all very much. Cameron Askew. Michael McMillan. James Rouse. Rebecca Altman. All right, you guys can squeeze in, slide over a little bit, shift a little bit. To make sure everybody gets on camera and speaking into the mic. So proceed when you're ready. Stating your name and the organization, if one, and you have 2 minutes. Who wants to go first?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to come before you today. I'm Michael McMillan, the president of Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1300. We represent nearly 3,000 employees. That's in bus operations, rail operations, bus maintenance, and rail maintenance for the Maryland Transit Administration. And it's our members who move Maryland daily. You know, with that being said, is the fact that they're the frontline employees. Whenever a bus doesn't show up, whenever a train breaks down, whenever you just have service that's disrupted in any way, then our frontline employees are the first ones who are attacked, assaulted, because these things aren't there. Because of the disinvestment in the system, the lack of buses, the lack of operators, the lack of maintenance repair, that these things take place. We strongly support the governor's proposed budget plan that he has for the transit, and we encourage this committee also to support it. We are partners with the Maryland Move Coalition that we support as well, and this type of investment will not only give safe, reliable, and effective transportation to the state of Maryland, but from my eyes, and also being with the Maryland Transit Administration for 30 years, 15 years as a bus driver, 7 years as a train operator, and also the 8.5 years watching my employees, members get assaulted, it will give a reduction in assaults if they have this reliable service and they're not being the first ones being attacked when the service doesn't show. So I want to thank you for this time that you've given me, and we ask that you strongly support the governor's budget.
Absolutely. Before we move on, just want to know, since you represent the men and women that are part of the system, you know, you have a relationship with the administration of the system?
Yes. One thing that we did.
I just want that on record as well.
Oh, yeah. One thing we did.
Been there, done that as well. So yeah.
One thing that we did partner with is for the growth of the MTA and starting a partnership with the apprenticeship program, which I strongly feel we were equal partners in that. Matter of fact, we had one female operator in that program who will, when she successfully complete that program, be the first female aid repairman.
Oh, awesome. All right, that's good news. Keep us up to date. Next.
Sure. Thank you. Sure. Good afternoon, Chair Jackson and members of the Public Safety, Transportation, and even Environment Subcommittee. My name is Rebecca Altman, and for the record, I have already submitted testimony. I have the privilege of serving as the Senior Vice President of University of Maryland Medical Center and the Chief Administrative Office for the Midtown campus. I appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of the Maryland Transit Administration and the budget for the upcoming fiscal year. As a healthcare leader, I see firsthand the critical role that reliable, accessible, and efficient public transportation plays in supporting both our employees and our patients. As one of the largest employers in the city, 10,000 employees, healthcare professionals between both campuses, including nurses, physicians, technicians, support staff, residents, and medical students depend on public transit to reach our hospitals and provide essential life-saving care. Additionally, as one of the largest healthcare providers, many of our patients depend upon MTA services to access medical care. We know that through the health-related social needs screenings, 30% of those screened report that transportation is a barrier for them to access care. And that's just at Midtown alone. That doesn't count downtown and those who decide or decline to do the survey for us. The University of Maryland Medical Center Midtown campus is located along the light rail service line right on Howard Street, which is critical and vital area of economic development for the Midtown community and for the city. This makes public transit an essential resource for staff and for the patients we serve. A well-funded MTA is essential for ensuring healthcare access. Many of our patients, as you've heard, lack personal vehicles or access to a vehicle and rely on public transportation for critical services. Supporting our healthcare workforce, it operates 24/7. Off shift is very important to us. And enhancing healthcare equity. It levels the playing field so people can access healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, can you hear me? All right. Good afternoon, Chair Jackson and members of the committee. My name is Cameron Askew, and I'm the Communications Director of the Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City. And I'm here today in support of the administration's final consolidated transportation program for fiscal years 25 through 30, which is focused on making deliberate investments in preserving the transportation system and spurring economic growth, and also taking advantage of federal funding to enhance Maryland's transportation capabilities. These funds are absolutely critical as the financial standing of our state, as well as the success of our students, depends on reliable public transit. And as MTA Administrator Holly Arnold stated previously, about 90% of rides are used for some economic purpose. With additional funding to the MTA, we can secure advancements to the Baltimore Red Line project, maintain and modernize our bus and light rail fleets, and make use of federal funding for projects like the Frederick Douglass Tunnel or modernizing the Baltimore Penn Station. Implementing this budget will keep Maryland competitive, create economic and educational opportunity, and will provide reliable transit that connects people across the state. And I would like to say that we're in support of Governor Moore's budget, and I ask that the committee be in support of it too.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Will you be submitting your written comments?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Should I hand this too?
Yes, you can. To our analyst. Thank you very much. Mr. Rouse. How are you, sir?
My name is James Rouse. I'm here representing Transit Choices, a nonprofit which for the past 12 years has been advocating for the creation of a first-rate transit system for the Baltimore region. We are here today in support of this year's MDOT budget and associated revenue adjustments. The proposed budget would fund many MTA initiatives. These include new Metric cars and station improvements, including maintenance of the aging escalators, new light rail vehicles and associated infrastructure to replace the present trains which are at the end of their lifespan, more buses to support their fleet and make the system both more reliable and frequent. Without this money, we can look forward to more frequent breakdowns in the transit systems and the accompanying disruption of service. The result will make it harder for citizens to get to their jobs and schools on time in a reliable manner. The cost of doing nothing is catastrophic. Without maintaining what we have in good repair, we will not be eligible for future federal funding. Baltimore should be the economic engine for the state, creating jobs, drawing investment, and increasing our tax base. It is being held back by its high rate of poverty and crime. Studies have shown the biggest obstacle for people trying to escape cycles of poverty across America is the lack of access to good jobs and educational opportunities because of poor public transit. Read our brochure, which we hand deliver to every one of your offices, and see our argument about why creating a great public transit system would reduce the tax burden for all Marylanders.
Thank you, sir. Let's
start by approving the governor's addition of funds for transit in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Do we have your written remarks, sir? Yes, we do. Thank you. All right.
Have your written remarks. Asking what?
Yes, we do.
They do.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So next up, we have Anna Maria Palmer, Jennifer Vay, John Laria, and Brandy Sarah Reese. Did I say that right?
That's pretty good.
Yes, it works. Enough for government work, right? I got it. All right, proceed when you're ready. Please state your name and your organization.
Sure. Good afternoon. I'm Anna Maria Palmer. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Human Resources Officer for GBMC Healthcare. GBMC Healthcare is comprised of one fine hospital in Towson, 40 physician practices located throughout Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Harford County, and Gilchrist Hospice and Home Health that is provided to Baltimore and all of the surrounding counties. So I'm here for two reasons today. One is to express gratitude for the MTA. They are a tremendous partner to our operation. And two, to let you know that GBMC is aligned to support the passage of the Maryland Department of Transportation's budget to ensure the state can provide safe and reliable transportation to contribute to the state's economic success. GBMC Healthcare respectfully requests your support of MDOT's budget and the associated revenue adjustments this legislative session. In particular, GBMC Healthcare would like to highlight the critical work this budget supports at the MTA, and it provides much-needed service, as you've already heard today, for riders across Maryland, and specifically for hundreds of GBMC and Gilchrist employees who utilize the MTA every day to commute to work to and from Baltimore City to Baltimore County and throughout the city. GBMC healthcare patients also utilize MTA mobility to receive their medical treatment. MTA is imperative to the economic success of our state, but it's also imperative for healthcare to enable that we have quality staffing and the staffing levels we need to meet the needs of our community. We meet those staffing levels by being able to attract employees who utilize the MTA. With the final consolidated transportation program for fiscal years 25 to 2030, the Moore Miller administration is making targeted investments in safety, system preservation, and leveraging all of the available funding. So I thank you today in advance for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Do we have, are you going to submit your testimony, ma'am?
I can later.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Me too.
Yep, sorry.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Vey. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and Executive Vice President at the Greater Baltimore Committee. On behalf of GBC, I'm asking you to support the FY 2026 MTA budget. As the leading voice for the private sector in the Baltimore region, GBC actively works with over 400 private and public sector partners to grow a dynamic and inclusive regional economy. An expansive and effective transportation network is essential to that growth. Most obviously, a robust and reliable transit system is vital for connecting the region's workforce to jobs and consumers to businesses. In fact, during the many listening sessions that GBC hosted as part of the development of our 10-year economic opportunity plan, I don't think employers mentioned any single challenge more than the state of the Baltimore's transit system. Aside from supporting current residents and businesses, a robust and reliable system is also key to attracting and retaining talent, visitors, and new investment. A strong transit system provides choice and convenience and contributes to a higher quality of life, and thus makes regions who have such systems far more economically competitive than those who don't. Given the state's anemic economic growth, it simply can't afford not to invest in the MTA. In the first place, we already are facing a system on the verge of decline. Deferral of state of good repair funding will lead to further deteriorations in services, threatening safety and dependability of the system and leading to higher costs over time. Second, as already noted, failure to maintain an adequate state of good repair jeopardizes existing and future federal funding. And finally, future development efforts won't be viable if state of good repair investments fall behind. Our region's aspirations to improve bus service to regional transit hubs or make investments like the Red Line will succeed or fail based on the health of the existing system. Moreover, maintaining momentum for both planned and future development around our transit hubs hinges on the extent to which investors are confident that our existing transit assets will be maintained and ultimately upgraded. In short, we need to invest in this system and show that we value this system, and for that reason, I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, John Laria, Chair of the Baltimore Regional Transit Commission, which was created by you, the General Assembly, to provide oversight and advocacy for Baltimore Regional Transit, including the MTA. The subcommittee has heard from me before in the larger MDOT overview about deep concerns regarding state of good repair, about the fragility of the system, about our gratitude for what the governor has done in the restorations, and the need for support
And today, apparently, I brought reinforcements, at least 16 of them, according to the chair's count. I'm sure you'll hear from them, or you've heard from them, about economic impact, about jobs, about public health, about the environment. I just wanted to take a moment, since I've given you written testimony, to give voice to a few transit riders and their own perspective on this in this way. And there are several statements. One, the MTA is my only way to get to work downtown. Without the bus, I wouldn't have a job. It's that simple. Two, I live in West Baltimore, and public transit is the only way I can get to my doctor's appointments across town. It's a lifeline for people like me. Three, Baltimore's bus system connects me to school and my part-time job. I couldn't afford college without it. Four, as a senior, I depend on the bus to get to places and see my friends. It keeps me active and independent. Five, not everyone in Baltimore can afford a car. Reliable transit means people can get to work regardless of their income. And finally, quote, if we want a stronger Baltimore, we need a stronger transit system. It's not just about convenience, it's about opportunity. And to me, that mirrors what the governor has been saying now, I think, for quite a while, that you can't have economic mobility without physical mobility. This budget is not the maximum we need, as the secretary knows, and we've discussed it. It's not, the governor knows it's not the maximum we need. It is the minimum we need, but we really need it. So I urge you to support the governor's budget and to allow us to begin to invest, and as the secretary says, to get the system back on track. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, thank you. My name is Brandy Savarese. I came to Annapolis today from my home in Baltimore City, where my husband and I are daily MTA bus and light rail commuters. I personally commute 1.5 miles from my home to City Hall every day. It most days takes me about 40 to 45 minutes. That's about the best case scenario. I'm before you to encourage sustained, if not increased, investment in reliable and robust public transportation. The service we have now is unreliable, infrequent, and frankly underfunded. I personally can afford the time lost waiting on a bus that doesn't come on a route that has 25 to 30-minute headways. But with each ghost bus, I am reminded of the middle and high school students who commute twice a day, 60 to 90 minutes, just to get to their schools. I'm also reminded of the folks who must punch a clock. I don't have to punch a clock. They can't rely on the bus to get to work on time. These users, even myself, are held hostage by poor and unreliable service. And I just want to acknowledge to the administrators in the room that I know that this is not necessarily your fault. But we are held hostage by a poor and unreliable system, by a system that does not meet our basic needs. Riding transit is my choice. It's my family's choice, but it's a choice I can afford to make. Your commitment to approve and hopefully eventually increase MTA funding is a commitment to the opportunities and the quality of life for your constituents and for all Marylanders. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to your support.
Thank you very much. Next up, the last two, Lindsay Middleton and Benjamin Groff. What's your name?
Brian O'Malley.
Okay, yes. Come on.
I thought I got confirmation once.
Yes. You're right, I saw you on two lists. You guys will slide over a little bit. I need you in front of a microphone and in front of the camera. You proceed. You have 2 minutes. State your name and organization, please.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Mendelson, and I'm the Senior Transportation Campaign Representative with the Maryland Sierra Club. The Maryland Sierra Club strongly supports more investments in MTA. We know that public transit is key to cutting the vehicle pollution that fuels the climate crisis and contributes to more respiratory illnesses like asthma, especially in children. When we invest in public transit and transit-oriented development, we're building more efficiently and sustainably, which means we can protect green space, mitigate stormwater runoff, and reduce energy costs. Sierra Club is a proud member of the MOVE Coalition. We support MDOT's proposal to raise $420 million in the BRFA for critical transportation needs, including the state of good repair for MTA. Our support for this package is contingent on MDOT's project prioritization bill and the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act advancing at the same time to ensure that we are spending money in ways that aligns with the state's goals. Even with this revenue package, MTA still has insufficient funds to fully meet its state of good repair needs and build the red line. I also want to remind you that federal funding makes up 21% of the Transportation Trust Fund. That is more than the gas tax currently contributes, and there's a lot of uncertainty right now with federal funding in the future. So it is incumbent on the Senate to pass additional measures, such as the Fair Share Act, so that we can make sure that MTA, WMATA, and the other locally operated transit systems across the state can stay afloat. Marylanders want more investment in transit. In fact, according to a poll that we recently commissioned with Gonzalez Research and Media Services, 88% of Marylanders say they support the state investing more in projects that give people additional choices to get to work, school, healthcare, and other locations by taking public transit, walking, and biking. And if I may, I just want to respond to a point that was made earlier. There has been historic disinvestment in MTA. In fact, when many of us were advocating for the Transit Safety and Investment Act a few years ago, you can see that there was 77% of investments from the capital budget went to SHA, and only 2% went to MTA, and only 1% went to WMATA. So we really need to make up for the historic lack of investments in the system. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Ben Groff on behalf of the Baltimore's Transit Future Coalition. For the record, my written statement is with you. The Baltimore's Transit Future Coalition is co-led by the Greater Baltimore Committee and the Greater Washington Partnership. It comprises more than 70 business and civic organizations in the Baltimore region, representing a unified business voice for better public transit. This is critical to our economic competitiveness and our aspirations for growth. The coalition is a member of the Move Maryland Coalition, and we are urging a favorable report on this budget. The budget is vastly improved from the version that was introduced in the fall. There are considerable new investments being made since the fall in this current version that are really ones that we cannot delay. State of good repair, staffing, planning for the Baltimore Red Line, including the east side access to Sparrows Point, and the list goes on. One thing I'll also add is the Greater Washington Partnership released in January an economic impact statement of MTA's expenditures produced by the consultancy EY, which showed that simply by existing, the MTA generates almost $2 billion for our gross domestic product here in the state and supports 10,000 jobs. So MTA and public transit truly are a strong economic growth engine for the state. And I thank you for the time and again urge a favorable report. Thanks.
Thank you. You said you all released the report. Do we have it?
It was emailed in January. I would be happy to follow up again and bring it to the top of your inboxes.
Please. Thank you very much. So if you could allow Mr. O'Malley to get in.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry for the confusion with my sign up. I'm Brian O'Malley with the Central Maryland.
The best way to make sure you're signed up is to sign up for everything that's available.
I guess so. I guess so. This was the one I wanted.
It worked out. It worked. It worked. So welcome, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you, members of the subcommittee. I'm with the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance, and I came with a group that traveled together today from Baltimore. If you were part of that group, would you be kind enough to stand up for a moment? Not all of us signed up to testify, obviously realizing that you've got a busy day. But I just want to call to attention that these are folks who rely on the MTA. We have people who use the paratransit service. We have people who ride the MARC commuter train, people who ride the light rail, the metro subway, and the local bus. We have people who use it to get to work, and people who are parents of Baltimore City Public School students who use it to get to and from school.
We appreciate it. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. And so we're here to urge your support for the governor's budget and the investment it makes in the MTA. Desperately needed investment in state of good repair projects. We also are supporting bills that are before the Senate that get to responsible, careful spending, being good stewards of the public tax dollar to make sure that we invest in projects that deliver the most benefit. Senate Bill 395 is the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act. Senate Bill 198 is an MDOT bill, the Transportation Investment Priorities Act. And Senate Bill 190 is a transit-oriented development bill that's also an MDOT bill. And all of those would help make us stretch the dollars farther, be more efficient with how we spend them. And lastly, I just want to address that there was a witness who raised concerns about how much we're investing in transit versus roads and highways. We also heard from a member of the MTA police and that we're hiring more police for the Purple Line. The police for our highways and roads are not part of MDOT's budget. They're external to that, as are many of the costs, parking and otherwise, that support driving. So please keep that in mind when you take a closer look at the costs.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. All right. I think I may have another person on the list. I know we had James Smith speak on behalf of ASME, and I have a Jimmy Smith on here. I believe that's the same person. Secondly, Lester Davis.
He's over here testifying.
Okay. All right. Thank you all very much. That concludes our hearing. Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for and your team for hearing the customers and your citizens. So, thank you. So our next hearing, once we clear out. We're going to move to Maryland Department of Environment. Our analyst is going to get us started.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will now present the Maryland Department of the Environment's fiscal 2026 operating budget analysis. On page 1, you see there that the budget increase is $16.2 million, or 7%, to $247.3 million. Jumping right into the Managing for Results section, this is on page 8. Exhibit 1 reflects the Maryland air pollutant trends relative to air quality standards. So these are the national ambient air quality standards. Basically, things were looking great as of last year. Everything, we were meeting all the standards, including the ozone 8-hour standard, was the first time we met that. However, due to the fires up in Canada and the kind of air pollution related to that, we were not able to meet the goals, at least for the ozone standard in 2023. Second, Managing for Results Exhibit 2, this is on page 10. This reflects information about child blood lead levels. Just a little note here, the data usually is provided by the administration and by the Maryland Department of the Environment. We receive the data as part of the childhood blood lead surveillance in Maryland annual reports. However, the report was not available in time. This is the 22 report or the 2023 report as well, which has raised some concerns about the kind of the ability to get that data in, whether there's some contractor problems, which my understanding was that the data was then being done in-house. The question is, why wasn't that report provided? So MD should comment why it hasn't posted the report and give any kind of available information that's available about that, and describe why there are inconsistencies in some of the data between the different sources that are available for this data. So the data on Exhibit 2 on page 10 does reflect information from Maryland Department of Health, and reflects that more kids are being tested, which is excellent, and that we're seeing lower levels of elevated child blood lead, which is definitely the trends we want to see. And then Exhibit 3 on page 12, I believe that is, reflects information on Public Information Act requests and permit data. So we've received data for a number of years in terms of Public Information Act requests, the kind of turnaround time. Did not see that data this year. And the permit data reflects an interesting trend where a tremendous increase in the number of permits issued
applications received, but a decrease in the permits issued. So usually you'd see if there were more permit applications coming in, you should have more responses going out. But they would actually going in different directions. DLS recommends that MD comments on why the following measures were no longer reported, including Public Information Act requests and the permits process within applicable standard time, and also comment on why the number of permits issued decreased between fiscal 2023 and 2024, despite the increase in the number of permits received. Now, moving to page 13, just a brief note here about a fiscal 2025 budget amendment reflects kind of the underlying concerns about the Maryland Department of the Environment's budget. The fiscal 2025 budget amendment included funding from two large settlements. One was the $8 million settlement with Purdue Agribusiness, which is to the benefit of the Air and Radiation Administration, and there's a $1.1 million settlement to Fleischmann, or for Fleischmann's Vinegar Company. So these are two large settlements bringing money into the state, which apparently is needed. Or if we didn't receive that money, then we would actually not be able to do the work we wanted to do in fiscal 2025, which is a concern. Obviously, we don't want to be in a situation where large settlements are the only reason why we're able to fund our department. So just wanted to highlight that. Moving now to the legislative priorities on page 14. There was one particular legislative priority in fiscal 2025. This is a grant to the city of Hagerstown to fund a long-range water and wastewater infrastructure needs study, and you should comment on the current status of that funding. The overview of agency spending is Exhibit 4 on page 15. The emergency and support services is over a quarter of the overall funding for the agency. Is around $28 million for the Bay Restoration Fund revenue bond appropriation, $11 million for the operations and maintenance grant funding for wastewater treatment plants upgraded to enhance nutrient removal, and salaries as well. And then for water and science and land and materials administration, primarily salaries starting out, and then for water and science, grants will be the next largest category, and for land and materials contracts. Moving now to the exhibit on proposed budget. This is on page 17, exhibit number 5, shows that $16.2 million increase in funding, the 7% increase between fiscal 2025 and 2026. Some of this is based on the timing of when the various COLAs are reflected in the budget or not reflected in the budget, and really kind of focusing here on the $8.2 million salary increase between the 2 years. There is a concern here that the agency uses something called miscellaneous adjustments as a particular sub-object within the personnel expenditure sub-objects to reflect what appears to be a lot of the special fund contingent appropriations in fiscal 2026, which basically makes it difficult to understand the changes between the 2 years. And therefore, DLS does have a recommendation for the agency to comment on why they were used in that particular way, that particular sub-object, and also to thank the agency for submitting the information on the prior year personnel sub-objects that were previously all put in one particular sub-object, so that information was provided. Therefore, DLS recommends that the funding that was restricted until that was done be released. In terms of some other components in the budget there's a $600,000 increase for Chapter 644 and 645 of 2024. This is related to emergency preparedness for radiation and the Radiation and Emergency Preparedness Protection Act. So that funding will be used to prepare a technical emergency radiation response plan, procure equipment and more advanced radiological monitoring equipment, and then allow MDE to serve as an off-site response organization for that purpose. In terms of some of the other changes in the budget there, you see a $500,000 increase for the Baltimore Regional Water Governance Model Work Group grant. So that was legislation from last year that required that work to be done. This is the grant to help out with that for that purpose. And in terms of routine operations on page 18, a couple of the large changes or reductions. This is the contractual full-time equivalent funding decreases between the 2 years because there's 50 contractual conversions in the fiscal 2026 allowance, as well as 3 new positions. And there's also a $1.1 million decrease in the Maryland Department of the Environment's portal Major Information Technology Development Project. That's due to the timing of when that funding is coming into the budget, as well as the funding for the Wells and Septic Portal project as well. On that topic of those particular projects, that's noted as potential concern going forward due to questions about the ability of the agency to kind of work with those 2 projects in terms of whether they're going to use the one-stop platform vendor or go it on their own with something called agile service teams. So one of the concerns there is that the costs appear to be changing somewhat. It looks like the risk factors are increasing, the number of risk factors for the two projects, the major information technology projects. Therefore, DLS recommends that the agency comment on those particular projects and why it went this particular route in terms of contracting this particular way. On page 20, there's a discussion here about the Clean Water Commerce Act. So it's $20 million a year in funding from the Bay Restoration Fund, provides for cost-effective nitrogen and phosphorus and sediment reductions for Chesapeake Bay restoration purposes. However, due to the fiscal conditions of the state, it seems like there's an opportunity here perhaps to take a hiatus from that spending and perhaps use that funding to then defray operating expenses in the Water and Science Administration. So on page 20, DLS does have that recommendation there, which would then allow for obviously addressing some of the concerns of the fiscal situation of the state and then just a hiatus in terms of some of the work to be done in that particular program. BRFA, Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act, and other contingent legislation are discussed in Exhibit 6 on pages 21 and the following pages. I'll just highlight here one of the large changes is the funding for the Air and Radiation Administration using Strategic Energy Investment Fund funds, and that's noted on the bottom of page 23. So in fiscal 2025, there's a reduction for deficiency of $6.5 million or $6.6 million reduction in general funds, and then a $6.6 million increase in special funds from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund. So that's obviously a cost containment measure for fiscal 25, and similarly for the fiscal 2026 is $6.1 million general fund reduction, and a similar amount of money being budgeted from the Strategic Energy Investment Fund for that particular purpose. Moving now to some of the information on the other bills. Senate Bill 250 is in a departmental bill. It's noted on page 28. It was introduced in the 2025 legislative session as a number of components. The concern that DLS is raising here is that the additional revenues that are programmed to be received under the bills, the fee increases, appear to exceed, or that the revenues are less than the appropriations that they're supposed to support. So that's obviously a situation in which you don't have as much money as you need to then support that appropriation, which would then look like you'd need a general fund deficiency. Therefore, MD should comment on how it plans to address the estimated shortfalls due to the lower revenues in those particular funds that are receiving the revenues from the Senate Bill 250. In terms of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and Inflation Reduction Act funding, that's on page 28, and then on following pages. Exhibit 7 on page 30 gives the big picture look at the funding that's competitive funding that the Maryland Department of the Environment is either receiving or pending funding. I don't have any information about whether any of this money is being held up by the federal government. I'll just say that now. There is a substantial amount of money that has been awarded. It's $51.4 million, none of which requires a match. And there's also funding that's being requested along with the Maryland Department of Emergency Management. Some of that funding does require a $100,000 or so match. MD should discuss the status, allocation, budgeted funding, timing of budgeted funds, and planned uses for all Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act and Inflation Reduction Act funding. Moving now to the first of the personnel data on page 31. Just a 53 position increase in MDE's budget. Once again, that's the 50 contractual conversions of regular people in contractual full-time equivalent positions moving to regular positions. And then you also have 3 new positions in the climate change program. Maryland Department of the Environment's vacancy rate has decreased a little bit from 13.2% last year to around 10.13% in the fiscal 2026 budget. And it looks like there are some vacancies, but it's a little difficult to tell exactly how many because some of that correlates with new positions in the fiscal 2026 allowance. Moving now to page 33, this reflects the first issue concerning state climate change funding. So one of the big questions is how much does climate change mitigation going to cost Maryland? The Climate Solutions Now Act required the Maryland's climate pollution reduction plan. That plan noted that there could be about $1 billion annually needed in public investment for climate change mitigation purposes. Exhibit 8 on the following pages now reflects what that budget looks like already in the state of Maryland. It shows around $3.1 billion in funding across a number of agencies. The majority of this funding, interestingly, is all in the Maryland Department of Transportation for its emissions reduction program. It's around 93% of the overall funding for Chesapeake, or for greenhouse gas reduction. There is also funding reflected here for disproportionately affected communities. Some of the programs reflect about 100% of their funding going to that purpose. DLS recommends, or MD comments on what this really means in terms of the state's work on climate change mitigation. We have this plan now, or we have the idea that we need around $1 billion each year, and now we're showing $3.1 billion already in the budget. So is the $1 billion on top of what's already in there, or is it part of that? How does this number kind of affect the administration's thinking about how it budgets for climate change mitigation, and kind of some nitty-gritty details also about whether any discussion has been had about a statewide budget code to track greenhouse gas emission reduction spending, which would enable for more fine-grained reporting on that particular topic. And also the idea of expanding the use of geo-referencing tools to determine where projects are. That would allow for understanding where disproportionately affected communities are and whether they're incorporated into this funding for the climate change mitigation. The next issue concerns, on page 38, concerns the statewide recycling needs assessment. So chapter 465 of 2023 did require a needs assessment. There have been several delays in the work to getting that needs assessment completed, and then also for the Producer Responsibility Advisory Council's recommendations to come out. As of February 8th, they were still discussing their recommendations, but they didn't have the final report from the consultant to be able to actually finalize those recommendations. However, there was one note in that meeting that was listened to online that it's possible that we could be basically requiring the Circular Action Alliance, the producer responsibility organization that's going to be kind of implementing a lot of this work, to reimburse the state for, or other entities for, any kind of needs assessments currently and then going forward. MD should comment on the likely timing of the final needs assessment publication, and on whether there'll be a recommendation to reimburse the state for the funding, the timing of that reimbursement, and whether that will be future revenue to support MD's extended producer responsibility work going forward. Issue number 3 on the bottom of page 38 concerns building energy performance standards data. So last year, the General Assembly restricted funding, the Air and Radiation Administration's budget for the final submission of energy use intensity targets and standards regulations. The idea here was that more work needed to be done in that particular area. The funding was restricted with the allowance for the funding to still be used for the purposes of submitting a report on energy use intensity costs and economic feasibility and meeting energy use intensity standards. However, the agency was unable to do that because the data is not available yet. That data will not be available until the end of fiscal 2026. Therefore, the agency was not able to submit the report. They note that the final regulations, or the regulations they've completed so far, do not include the energy use intensity standards component that was of concern in that budget bill language. So they have abided by the budget bill language, and then will submit the report when the data is available in fiscal 2027. The other question here about kind of funding for the building energy performance standards is the $1 million that was looked at last year as being needed for a system to kind of track a lot of the work being done there. So it doesn't look like it's in the budget this year. DLS would like the agency to comment on whether that funding is available in the budget and whether the agency has budgeted the positions it really needs to do some of the work looking forward that were noted in last year's analysis. So on the middle of the page there on page 40, MD should comment on those particular issues. Fourth issue on page 40 concerns the Maryland Used Tire Cleanup and Recycling Fund annual report. So it was submitted as requested and notes that a lot of the responsible parties are doing the work, which is fantastic, so that the state is not on the hook for work that needs to be done by the actual people who have the tires out there. There is one large project left, around 400,000 scrap tires in Caroline County, the Foy's Salvage Greensboro site. DLS recommends that the community narrative be continued for this upcoming fiscal year for that scrap tire annual report, since it does spur the development of it. The fifth issue concerns, on page 41, concerns the enforcement and inspection position strength assessment and vacant position filling report. So this was one of the timing things. The report came in yesterday or the day before, so the analysis obviously had to be completed before then. DLS recommends here that MD should comment on why that report wasn't submitted as requested on January 1, 2025, and then kind of talk about what was would have been included in that report And DLS also recommends that committee narrative be adopted, looking forward to next year for that report as well. On page 41, I've already highlighted this a little bit, major information technology development projects. There are 2 projects that are, once again, not being used, not going to use the vendor through one-stop action, but instead are going to be using the agile teams approach, which, first of all, the agency could explain a little bit more about that. That would be fantastic, about how that works exactly. And then also discuss the reason for the cost increase for the Maryland Department of the Environment's Wells and Septic Portal project, despite the fact that teams is supposed to reduce the overall cost, and why in the kind of scope of the Maryland Department of the Environment's Portal project as well, which looks like there are substantial increase in the number of permits that be included in that particular project. And MD should discuss any relationship between these projects and its overall IT modernization strategy. On page 42, the operating budget recommended actions. The first one there is to reduce $20 million for the Clean Water Commerce Act, contingent on a BRFA provision authorizing the use of that funding to defray operating expenses in the Water and Science Administration. Second recommended action is that use tire cleanup and recycling fund annual report narrative. And then the third, enforcement inspection position strength assessment narrative. And then finally, on page 43 is that budget reconciliation and financing act recommended action as discussed. Unless there are any questions, that concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Any questions for our analysts? If not, Madam Secretary and your team, I see a familiar face on your team. Welcome. Close to home. Welcome back home to Mr. Adam Ortiz, Prince George's County. Yeah. So, please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, I am Serena McElwain, Secretary of Maryland's Department of the Environment, and I really do appreciate this opportunity to be here today to present our fiscal year 2026 operating budget of $247.3 million, which is a 7% increase from this year. And I also want to thank you, Andrew, for your thorough analysis that you give us every year. You made some really good points and things that even I was a little unaware of, so thank you for being so thorough. We have also submitted all of the questions that you've answered, that you've asked of us, so you do have all of our responses to those things, so thank you again. I think we all are really super aware of the fiscal challenges that the state is facing. And that's why I really do believe that our budget is appropriate, because it's based solely on funding the essential investments so that we can continue to protect the environment and support Maryland's growing economy. And in order, I know this as an administrator for years, 15 years of my 30-year career, I know that the budget, it's sufficient when you have a real strong and efficient operation inside the building. And that's why I have, as secretary, I have dedicated a considerable amount of time in transforming the operations inside MDE. And that includes, we've eliminated a lot of unnecessary non-value steps in some of the work that we're doing. We've eliminated a lot of red tape. We've transformed the operation, which includes improving customer service and literally watching every single dollar that we spend. And I do now want to just highlight a few of our key accomplishments that we've had over the past year. And I think that it will give a good indication of the progress that we're making in this area. We have more inspectors now, which means we've increased the number of inspections by 31%. Our climate program is now fully staffed, which means we can start focusing even more on implementing the climate goals as required by law. The 1 million trees program, we now have, well, the 5 million tree program, we have planted about 1 million trees now as of 2024. That's twice as much as we had last year, and I think it's bringing us even closer to meeting that 5 million tree goal. So I'm really proud about that, and as you all know, that goal is for 2031. So we're doing really well in that area. We've restored 365 acres of brownfields, which is really, really amazing. And as you all know, we're turning those previously contaminated land into productive and safe spaces that really does benefit local economies. We signed historic, and Andrew, I know you mentioned that, but we have signed historic enforcement settlements. And that really does underscore the determination that we have to hold violators accountable and to ensure that we're protecting public health. And I've been asked this a lot since I've started. Happy to say, in terms of those zombie permits, as you all call them, they're administratively extended permits. We have, we've actually, we hope to go to zero next year by the end of this year, but so far we're at 81% of those permits being closed. So we're making good progress there. As I said earlier, we are really working diligently to be more efficient and save taxpayers money. For instance, we are realizing savings by doing just small things. For example, simply by switching phone providers, we saved $100,000. We also saved $53,000 by simply removing phone desks that we weren't using. So these little things mean a lot, and they add up, and those are just examples of what we're doing to be more efficient and saving taxpayers money and saving our budget. So we're also developing, in terms of efficiencies, we're developing an online permitting system. We're also digitizing our records. And as you know, when you implement those kinds of process improvements, again, that's how we are able to deliver 5-star, as I call it, customer service and be more efficient. And last, we are hoping to address some of the unfunded programs that we have at MDE. Some of those programs are being paid for by taxpayers. They're supposed to be paid for by customers, and it's costing the state $14 million in general funds. So we do need to address that, and we can address that by simply making sure that we are charging the right fees for the right programs at the right time, and that's what we're doing. So I'm going to close by addressing a large cloud that's over all of our heads, which is an indication that a storm is coming by way of the flurry of presidential executives that are impacting our program. And in particular, they are impacting the climate program that we have. And so we are watching everything that's going on with the federal executive orders, the impact to all of our funding mechanisms that are coming from the federal government, such as grants. We do know that some of them are being impacted. And again, it changes daily. I was just told yesterday that some of them were unfrozen, but then the next day they're frozen again. So again, we're just watching to make sure that we're keeping ahead of what's going on. That's it for me. I'm open to any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you, Madam Secretary. I have a couple of questions before we go around the table. A couple of things. I happen to live in one of those areas where power plants have been closed. We certainly have concerns with the contamination that's left from there. But also I also represent an area that has the only nuclear power plants in the state. So it's great to hear about your radiation and emergency preparation program, or the act that you have in place. Could you talk to those two? I am in southern Prince George's. I represent Charles and Coward counties as well, so those 3 counties. And we have had, over the years, our run of those coal-powered power plants. And I know before Keeves came online, the conversations that were brought up dealt with air quality, when the administrative judges would present themselves before the community, and oftentimes the public notice and the public input when we're talking about our environmental impacts I think the community gets a little confused about when the public input is allowed and what type of public input is allowed. So they're sometimes restricted to air quality versus at one facility, a proposed facility, and the cumulative impact, but not the cumulative impact of the number of power plants in that region of the state that have been up and running for years. So could you speak to that? And I'm certainly going to follow up with some documentation later offline. But when you talk about your inspectors and the permitting and the ensuring that our grounds are healthy to be able to invest in economic development in some of those areas, that's a huge concern in Southern Maryland, as well as other regions of the state.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Chris Hoagland to come up so we can talk in more detail, but I will address this in general. The permitting process that we have, we make sure that the communities are involved. They're open to community members. There's never a situation where community members are not allowed or are not aware of what's going on when we're talking about permitting of those systems that you're referring to. And I think you mentioned earlier about the emergency response. We do have an emergency response organization at MDE, and it is very thorough. We have a lot of, what do we call them? A lot of exercises that we do to make sure that those areas which are in your district are safe. There's a robust process. We also work with MDIM with those emergency response exercises as well. But if you can just talk quickly about opening up all of the conversations that we have with local communities when we're talking about those nuclear systems.
And the key, Madam Secretary, and again, we'll follow up with more specifics, but the key is your communication with the communities across the state. And again, this has been a long-standing challenge. I know that things are changing for the better. However, when uncertainty sets in at any level, uncertainty sets in at every level. So, we have communities that are impacted. We'll talk a little more offline about Eagle Harbor, as you know, one of our resort towns, and the challenges that they have had over the years, not only with the power plants, but also with the utilities and the runoffs and all those matters. So it's a lot on your plate. But it's great to hear that you're getting the positions filled, for your inspectors, that your climate team folks are there as well. So we want to capitalize on these opportunities to make sure that we get specific concerns addressed as well.
Okay, maybe we'll address just quickly, though, the communication.
Absolutely.
To your community, because it's really important. And so why don't we just talk quickly about that?
Of course, and for the record, Chris Hoagland, I'm the Director of the Air and Radiation Administration. We look forward to following up on those specific concerns, and it is very important that we take community input into account in permit processes. A major project and a major priority of the Secretary's is improving how we perform these processes so that there's more community engagement and communities have more agency in the process as we pursue environmental justice in communities throughout the state that are not yet enjoying the clean air that they deserve.
Absolutely. And the Secretary, for the record, the Secretary and I sat on a piece of legislation last year regarding environmental justice. So I'm very much aware of what the agency has put in place. And it's great to see that there's movement in getting vacancies filled and bringing on qualified individuals who not only have the expertise, but some who know the concerns of the region. And so it's great that you all are putting together that team. I will say, just to step back a little bit about public input. As we know with major projects, not only in your bailiwick, but other projects, that sometimes the public is not involved until after BPW has granted a project. Sometimes, folks work every day. They're not up to speed on what's going on at their local level. So your coordination with the local governments when exceptions are made or special exceptions are made and projects are granted at the local level and then they end up at Public Works and then you wait for that hearing to come, and in some cases, you may not be able to slow down a project before you get enough information or stop a project, without the, without the assistance of sometimes our Army Corps of Engineers, which has been put to work in our region before. So we just want to be a partner and to be your voice across our state on, that the Maryland Department of Environment is engaged and is, interested in ensuring that we're all safe, because we have our disparities. Obviously, it leads to health disparities and lack of economic development opportunities and all of those. So while it may not sound as if we're that excited, we're very excited that you're moving in the right direction.
Thank you.
And secondly, and most importantly, that there is a partnership there as we move forward. And I will move to everyone else in a second, but I was in Tripoli a week or so ago when you all were speaking about Senate Bill 250. Yes. And I believe the young man with the green tie was speaking about coal ash, and even though these power plants, not all of them are still operating. Right. A few have to because of the overage, but there's still the residual impact of what that has done to the communities. And so communities need to be made aware. And there are pieces of legislation that's attempting to do that. Even if they don't pass, communities need to be made aware of what the recourses are and to ensure that we can get that information out. So, okay. All right?
Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with Senator Sarwar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Madam Secretary, thank you for all the information. It's always good to see you and always good to work with you. As you know, the biggest wastewater treatment plant is in my district. And we hear the progress and the good things that are happening. We have other actors around the area that like to react to things, as you know, about things, but we have people that are literally volunteering to do tests around the area. And we have like Back River Restoration and Maryland Waterways, and they work with us as I work with them. They're making sure that they're just ahead of it all the time. On the ongoing inspections that we do have, can you just speak on how they're going? And can maybe we, maybe your last ones that you've had, if we can get that information, and then maybe you can give it to us, so we can just see from where we were and where we are today. Because I think it's important that we do have that information, and we can carry on with that and see what more we can do.
Thank you. I think it is important that you have that information so that you can see that the progress that we are making. We have done a tremendous job in increasing the number of inspections that we're doing at Back River and Patapsco. And sorry, I thought you were Lee for a minute there. We'll bring Lee back up. But we are still inspecting. We were inspecting monthly, as you know, when we first had the incident there and when we had all the problems with the wastewater treatment plants. But we're regularly there. We're also working very closely with the people that are at Back River and Patapsco. So we have a partnership now that MES is gone. So I think in order to give you like specifically how often are we doing those inspections, we could just send you that information. But Lee, if you could just talk very quickly about the number of inspections that have increased and how often we're going back there.
Sure, thank you. And for the record, Lee Curry, I'm the Director of the Water and Science Administration at Maryland Department of the Environment. Thank you for the question. And thank you for your partnership too, and the nonprofits partnership. Yes. Our most recent inspections show that Back River is meeting its standards. We've seen fantastic progress at both plants. And just wrapping up last year, those important nutrient requirements, both of the city's plants met those requirements. So that's really good news. We also have the early detection system in place, so we're able to monitor not just those two, but all the big plants on a monthly basis. And then we've also ramped up our work in applications so we don't end up in this situation again. We asked for more information on what's happening from operation and maintenance. And I think another good news story is that from the penalty, there was money that will go back into the community, and that's something we're talking about with the Secretary right now. about where that will go. So I think all those are good news stories.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
The
number of inspections.
Yes.
At the plant,
Yeah, he wants another frequency of the inspection.
we've decreased it. We were going out every month.
Yes.
And then we decreased it to quarterly, and now we're back down to an annual inspection for that facility. But we're in regular communication, so it's not like we only go once a year and don't hear from them. But we did that because of where they're performing. Their levels are actually better than their permit requirements.
I appreciate that. And if I could, one more question, Mr. Chair. The making sure that we're ahead of preventive maintenance because we were so far behind, and make sure we have the qualified people that need to be there working with our partners from not just from the city, but our community colleges and our colleges. I'm hoping that's ongoing, and we just want to make sure we're where we need to be always. Having that communication is so important, but just making sure that the preventive maintenance, and you said it, not going back to where we were, but where we need to be. It's just something that's concerning, and we just want to make sure that we as partners, we're ahead of this. And again, thank you for your work. The state moved in and they made a major difference, and we saw that, and I want to thank you. But I never want to step back and think that everything's okay. I want to make sure that there's always the accountability, that they're making sure that they're moving forward and making doing the right steps. Preventive maintenance is a very important thing, and then just ahead of the game. That's all. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to ask you a question regarding your fee increase methodology. And I have a particular situation in my community that's really precipitated this question. It's Martin Marietta. They have 11 facilities in the state. And they received a notice that their inspections were going to go from $1,000 per facility to $12,000 per facility. So they understand that it was probably time for a recheck. And they also understand that in this environment, it was more than doubly the time to relook at. But what they don't understand is why they would go from $11,000 a year to $132,000 a year. Now, I did pull together a meeting, and some members of your staff were very responsive in joining the meeting. But what my constituents were told was, you have larger facilities, so it's more work. I need a bit more detail than that. You know, how many more inspections, how many more hours, how many more personnel? They understand why it might even go from 1 to 3 or even 1 to 6, but we need to better communicate the rationale for why such a big increase. I don't know which one they come under. I have a whole folder back in my office. I suspect it might be the Surface Mined Land Reclamation Fund. But if you want to have someone get back to me, maybe we can dig a little deeper and get them a better explanation.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up, Senator. And it sounds like we do need we need more conversation about it, maybe a deeper dive, so that you all and your constituent can understand how those fees were calculated.
Thank you.
And why. So I will be sure to make sure that my folks, actually, Director Rick Kessler is here now, and so he'll get back in touch with you so we
Thanks so
can
much.
give you a little bit more information about what it is you're trying to understand.
Okay, I appreciate it.
We didn't just make it up, by the way. There is a
Oh, I'm sure you
methodology
didn't.
behind it,
Yeah.
but it does seem like a lot. But
It
thank
seems
you.
like a significant increase.
It is, but thank you also for acknowledging that it has been decades since we increased those fees. So they're long overdue, and so.
And they expect an increase. They're not pushing back. They just
Yes,
want to
and I
better
appreciate it.
understand.
And we'll make sure we give them that
Thank you.
information. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you. A couple of questions. One is, the chairman raised this issue of notice to communities related to permits. And I've never raised this in all the years I've been in the legislature, but every time I get a notice of a permit, it looks like you're checking a box and don't really want to hear from anybody. It's totally in contrast to what transportation sends out when they're sending out notices related to projects they're working on. I think there's a real opportunity to be, like on a scale of 1 to 10, they look like super bureaucratic box checking and not like a real invitation to put some input in. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that.
I will. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Now I'm curious to see what MDOT's sending out.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But we're not checking a box. We do want the communities to be involved, and maybe that's why you brought it up as well. We will make sure we go back and look at that.
That'd be great. So I appreciate that. Second, I want to go back to the federal money. Now, when you were last here, you said you'd heard nothing from EPA.
You mean a couple weeks ago?
A couple of weeks ago, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What have you heard since EPA since then?
Hasn't changed.
Zero communication on?
No, when we called US EPA, that has not changed. They're very quiet. They don't give us a lot of information. We're learning things just like you all are from the news, from conversations that we hear. It's piecemeal. Unfortunately, that's just how the communication is coming through us. I happen to work at US EPA for a long time, so I still have connections there. My staff here all have come from US EPA. So
probably more will be coming.
We're calling even people that we know to sneak and get information, and we're not getting it. So
God bless you for doing that. But what surprised me about it, that's not what we're hearing from other state agencies in terms of other federal agencies they're dealing with. So that's why I'm trying to understand this. So EPA, there is no formal or informal communication about federal money coming to our Department of the Environment.
No, and it sounds like it's hard to believe.
It's hard to believe because we're hearing the reverse from most other agencies.
I know, unfortunately, it is a fact.
All right, well, EPA stands out as always. So, okay, fair enough. On that, I appreciate that. Secondly, the analyst mentioned the recommendation study, whatever it's called, with the $1 billion a year to deal with climate change.
Right.
And I need to get my head around, so of that billion annual, how much are we putting in now, if any? I'm a little confused in relating that goal with what we're actually doing.
Right. So the ticket price, you're correct, is $1 billion, which was in the Climate Pollution Reduction Act. And there's a lot of things that we're doing that adds up to the $1 billion. One in particular I want to mention is the governor put aside $180 million this year toward another down payment toward the Climate Pollution Reduction Plan. Last year, the governor put another large amount, $90 million, toward it. We also had, because of what's going on with the federal funding and the grants and the money that we were considering, some of that money is now on hold. All of that money contributes to the $1 billion. So it wasn't all the funding for the state of Maryland. There are different sources that we were counting on to come in to help fund the $1 billion.
But that's what I'm trying to get my head around. So for FY '26, $180 million
correct
from the state money towards the billion. And you're saying there's also federal money that
we get federal money, grants. We get grants that are coming in. We have one grant that was $130 million. A lot of that funding went to MDOT, but that is a part of the $1 billion. Now the money, it was on hold. It was unfrozen yesterday. I don't know if it's frozen again today, but that's $130 million for climate pollution. So that's what I mean. Money like that we were actually depending on from the federal government all plays into the $1 billion that we need.
We don't need it right now, but do you have a summary that sort of lays that out on a piece of paper so we can see
Yeah,
the
we
math?
can provide,
See the math?
absolutely.
That
We can provide
that would be
that.
helpful. Okay.
We'll make sure you have that.
A second thing sort of related to that, I'm sure you're aware of this proposal that's been adopted by 1 or 2 states, what I call the big oil tax, which is a little oversimplification, but it's basically taxing the fossil fuel companies to pay for the damage that they've caused over many generations, which is projected to raise a lot of money. And is that something that the department and the administration have looked at and obviously have not proposed it, but it strikes me as kind of, from everything I've learned about, I'm not an expert on it, but I know a little bit about it, it seems like an obvious thing to do.
I'll have to get back with you on that in terms of where the administration is. I am familiar what you're referring to, but if you don't mind, I'd like to get back with you on that.
If you would, I'd be interested
will
if
do
there's an
that.
analysis of it, because it seems to me it's kind of an obvious solution to our funding problem on the climate change effort.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's important because then the climate change effort wouldn't be competing with the everything else. So, okay, I'd appreciate that. Last item is AI, which we're asking everybody about. My impression of your department, I may be totally wrong, is mostly about managing information. I'm sure there are other things that go on too, but I'm sorry?
Inspections.
But that's information. No, that's what I'm saying. It's collecting information, analyzing information, pushing out information, which seems like perfect for AI. So I'm curious as to where you all are in terms of seeing how AI can make your business more efficient.
Actually, that is something we looked into. Our business, however, though, it is, there's a lot of human interaction with what we do.
Sure.
We conduct a lot of inspections. We do give a lot of permits. That's where we're looking at permits that are coming in. But for us, we need to step back and get our operation in order first. In order for us to use AI, we have to automate some of the things that we're doing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of manual processes that AI is just, we can't use AI until we start getting these things online. And that's what we're working on now. So the priority is to start being more efficient, automative, and getting these things online. After that, then we will start looking into how AI can help us. Because I agree with you. I think all that's going on with AI is incredible. And so we hope to be able to use AI to help our operation be even more efficient.
One last twist on that question then. So how automated are you and how unautomated are you?
Well, that's a loaded one. Some of our processes are manual. Like, for example, we're still getting people sending in checks manually. And believe it or not, some folks unfortunately in my business operations are walking to a bank, taking checks. That's outdated. Some of the permits are not online. They're not automated. They have to send in information, packets. We're trying to make all of them online so that we can reduce all the paper and unnecessary work that we're doing and make it faster for us to respond to our customers. So it's quite a bit that we need to automate.
So do you have the money in the budget to do that?
We have some money in the budget to help us with automation. Do It also provided funding for us. I believe it was last year. I think it was last year to help us with so we can always use extra money if you want to give it to us, but
that's not
I
where I was
understand
going
where
with
you're
it.
coming from.
Yeah, that's not where I was going with it.
No, we do. We have a plan in place to try and automate as much as we can.
Maybe you could send us a little summary of plan, cost, schedule.
Okay.
That'd be great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Madam Secretary, for your permitting and inspections, your relationship, if you can sum it up today, if not, you can do it later, your relationship with the local governments regarding those matters. As we know, particularly with some of the groups that are energized around environmental justice or permitting And in general, the relationship, again, so when I talked about communications earlier,
Yes.
you all are bringing a new relationship with the community. But when a community hasn't had a relationship, that's not always accepted. And so we have to kind of work together to try to find out how we can make a concerted effort to get the community on board, that they are willing to accept, the information that you're trying to share with them. Because if you haven't had it for decades upon decades, I'm not talking about years on years, decades upon decades, and if you're living in certain areas of the state, a government agency sending you some information, it's just some information, as the senator mentioned, is like a bureaucratic document that you're really not inviting me to be a part of this process, and that's what's missing. Because if that's not, if we get that right, I will stop seeing boats on the side of the road. Like, people are discarding boats. They're not just discarding trash in the rural areas, in the rural tier of our county. They're discarding that because they don't believe that the county or the government will ever find out who they are. And, for some reason, folks do that in the rural areas. But let's work on that communication piece to ensure folks that we literally care about the environment. We literally care about the things that matter to you. And it's going to take a little bit, but there are some groups that are on the ground that are ready to partner up with you. And you've seen them in some of our hearings, and some have changed their tune from some of the legislation we worked on. But we're just trying to, drum up that support. It's important for us. We know we have issues with some of the local governments, but they need somewhere to turn. So
I appreciate you saying that. I know we're about to wrap this up, but I do want you to know that that is one of the reasons why I hired an assistant secretary for EJ, for environmental justice, and her name is Anika Atkinson. She has been working with the communities. The model we have is get up from your desk and walk into the community. And so that's what we're doing. We're calling them. Did you know there's a hearing on this permit in your area? So that's what we're doing. That's the kind of holding hand that we're doing. We had one hearing not too long ago where I asked my staff, can we get a bus and go bring the people to the hearing? I don't remember, I know my did we get that transportation? We did. That's right. So we provided transportation. So we want communities to know that you may not have been at the table before, but we want you there today. You need to know what's going on. And so that's the campaign that we have. Opening up the community, the lines of communication, making sure that they're there with us. So
we want to partner with you on that. We have an opportunity, whenever there's tough times, I believe, that's that challenge that you want to meet, and that's that opportunity that we're seeking. So that means everything to what we're doing, regardless of what's going on in the federal government, we're responsible for Maryland.
That's right.
We are responsible for Maryland. So I want to thank you all very much. I think we have three folks to testify. Madam Secretary, I will ask you, as I did with Secretary Wiedefeld, if you would remain to hear what these witnesses have to say. We would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Nice team you're assembling there. We will be in touch. We will be in touch.
Thank you.
All right.
Super.
So first up will be Mr. Galley. Are you speaking, or is Ms. Coble speaking for you today?
Have a nice weekend.
All right, Ms. Coble, come on up. Matt Stegman, are you speaking? Come on up. All right, 5 minutes, folks. Say your name and your organization. Did I say 5 minutes? I'm sorry. 2 minutes. 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
Wow.
2 minutes. It's probably because we have yesterday we had 5 hearings. I'd have called it up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Kim Coble with the Maryland League of Conservation Voters, and I'm here in support of you securing the proposed budget that the governor put out for the Maryland Department of the Environment. I have the opportunity and frankly the honor of working really closely with this agency. I co-chair the Maryland Commission on Climate Change with Secretary McElwain. I work very closely with the staff, and I would like to use the word outstanding when it comes to their work, their professionalism, their accountability, and their responsiveness. And that kind of work I felt really strongly that I needed to come and support. Additionally, the increase in personnel that has occurred over the last 2 years, thanks to your leadership and Governor Moore's, has made a big difference. And I want to applaud everybody that was involved with that decision and that implementation. I do respect the challenges that are in front of this committee and in front of the whole legislature in terms of the budget. It's daunting, I know, but I want to raise the point that the environmental programs in the state of Maryland make up about 1% of the state budget. MDE, DNR, MDA, and MEA, it's about 1%, and yet collectively, that group of agencies is contributing $300 million to deficit reduction. Understanding that that has to be done this year, understanding that we're hoping that that is a one-time situation for the budgets and for the agencies, but we really urge you to not take any more. There's not much blood left in the turnip, or whatever that is, and so we urge you to accept the Governor's Moore proposed budget. Thank you
very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman Jackson and members of the committee. Matt Stegman, I'm the Maryland staff attorney for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We are also here to support the budget for the Maryland Department of the Environment as proposed by Governor Moore. MDE plays an outsized role in leading Maryland's efforts to restore the Chesapeake Bay, in particular through its permitting and enforcement functions and through administration of the Bay Restoration Fund. Protecting air and water quality is something that saves lives. It reduces economic stress for families. It helps grow the state's economy. It's a smart investment, and having robust inspections and timely permitting is really key to that. There's some information in my written testimony as sort of a reminder of where the agency has come over the last couple of years. Secretary McElwain talked about having a goal to clear the backlog of the zombie administratively continued permits. We want to hold her accountable to that goal. As advocates, we always want to push the agency to do more and to do better, but in order for us to do that in good conscience, we need to know that the agency has the resources to be able to do that. So again, we support the budget as submitted by the governor, and just want to very briefly talk about the Clean Water Commerce account. The DLS recommendation is to take money out of that account on a one-year basis. We recognize the incredible strain that you are dealing with the budget, but that is a really important program that it's a tool that helps leverage private sector investment to effectively reduce sediment and nutrient pollution entering the bay, and does a lot of really great things in every corner of the state. So it's really important that is a program that is viable over the long term, and would ask you to please keep that in mind with whatever decision you make.
Thank you very much. Good to see you again. Thank you all. Any questions for the speakers? All right. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the hearing for today. We have a briefing coming up.